A Wimbleway, a Wimbleway, a Wimbleway, a Wimbleway. In the puddle, the mighty puddle, the fluffy swims tonight. In the puddle, the mighty puddle, the fluffy swims tonight. Ooh, Wimbleway. Hello, everyone. How are we all doing? Let's see. Let's pop out the chat for starters. So I have that up nice and visible because tonight's going to be a bit of an interesting one. I have got a book to talk about, and I've also got to talk about the patron vote and the suggestions that have come on, which have been very, very good and cool. And I'm going to answer questions. There seems to be lots of questions, and there seems to be lots of comment questions, which I should probably answer. One of the most interesting comment questions I've had in the last few days, and I will pop it up so I can repeat it verbatim. Hello, everyone, for starters. And I feel like I should answer this question quite quickly. Because it came up and it was just, it's an interesting comment to receive. This was from a gentleman called Hugh Thompson. If you're watching, hello, Hugh. Very interesting facts marred by and this was on Admiral John Buffnot. Very interesting facts marred by the fact that the presenter is evidently drunk and angry. It could have been so much better if it wasn't full of obvious resentment about something. As it was sadly like watching local pub bore so became unbearable. I am very sorry, Hugh. 2 issues, though, just small minor ones. I don't drink, so that definitely not drunk. And having gone through it myself, the most I can detect is that I'm being my normal sarcastic self, so not angry. Just British and sarcastic. Don't worry, though. It's easy to mistake the difference. I have seen it before. And let's see. So, things we've got coming in. Saying hello to people. Let's see. Hello, Frank. Let's see. Can you please bring up a map of the Franklin expedition and show where the passage to the east actually was found? So the people on it found the passage before they died. I believe it was credited them rather than the people who went looking for them. There is a map somewhere. Can I get the good one from Andrew Lambert's book? Is it on this Franklin expedition map? Let's see. Let's see if I can add the source and get it up. And this comes from Nova Science Programming on Air and Online. They have they're a fairly good resource. And as you can see, there is the Franklin expedition. And where they get to, they're the blue line. And then there's the Amundsen expedition, which is what actually gets it through. And basically, there is not much of a difference between the two in terms of their routing. It just depends on their route around King William Island. And then, of course, there is the passage south of Victoria Island that goes through and south of Banks Island and on the way to Alaska. So not a million miles different, but different enough in the world of ice to be problematic. Do you know what? Episode 69. I'm going to be nice. I'm glad you're going to be nice. Hello, Andrew Paul. Hello, Nautical Wolf. Hello, Peter Dawson. And Paul, I have 2 questions I've thought of in the last few days. The second is in modern context, so apologies in advance since this may not be the best platform. 1. If the Falklands War happened in 1985 and 1992, How would a post not review RN do? Well, they would have kept Fearless and Intrepid. Those have been saved by the Royal Marines, basically taking Not out and showing them how the landing craft worked. But where they would maybe, it's a debatable as to whether they'd have had Hermes or even Invincible. They may or may not have had. They might have had Illustrious though. They'd have still had an aircraft carrier. How much of an aircraft carrier capacity they'd have had would have been an interesting question. Honestly, the submarines still do their job. There would be more ships with Seawolf in service, so that might be a plus point, especially for the air defensive operations. It would be more complicated in other ways. The British would probably still win, but it wouldn't be exactly easy. It wouldn't be any easier. Let's put it that way. And to report, with the consideration of having 3 carriers at any time to have 2 ready for deployments, why do you not push for a third Queen Elizabeth? They wanted a third Queen Elizabeth, so they were told they couldn't have one. They were told they could have 2 carriers. That was it. So they pushed for 2 big ones. Because if you're going to only have 2, you might as well be as big as capable individually as possible, because odds are usually you only have going to have 1 available. If you have any available. And report, is it to do with coordinating our navies or using smaller ships to fill the capacity? Or could there be a third carrier in the future? We'd like there to be a third carrier in the future. As I said, I've often pointed out that we could just build some, and this is the advantage of having the system we've gone with in terms of F-35B. If we have LHDs with ski ramps on, and if we had 2 or 3 of those, they would be in the backup able to, in extremis, be able to act in the carrier role, just as the carriers can act in the extremis in the LPH role, the landing platform helicopter role. So that's probably the best route for a medium power to go. And for a limited number of ships, because you don't want specific air groups and be like the French, who have 1 carrier with an air group for that, and then 3 Mistrals, which have their own air groups, and it's a case of, yeah, so if your carrier is not available, you're in. And what can you do with a Mistral in those circumstances? So, pretty much, I'm hoping that Albion and Bulwark are replaced by LHDs with ski ramps. I know there are people keep going, oh, but we don't need to. We can do it this way. And we're going to replace them with this and that. And I'm going, yes, you can. But if you get an LHD with ski ramp, you have a more versatile platform for for other operations. But that gets me into trouble. People like engaging strategy, etc. Hello, Rick Vasala. Second, the Mon USA gets put back into 1905, a few weeks before the Great White Fleet comes back. They got their entire fleet in harbour in America, so they take it with them. How will they fare in 1905? And how will the 1905 USA fare without the Great White Fleet fare in 2022? Well, the 1905 USA in 2022 would be having an absolute panic attack, and I'm not sure how that would work. But the modern USA back in 1905 would be instantly be the most powerful nation on Earth many, many times over. So probably kiss goodbye to World War One. Maybe kiss hello to a whole new war, because suddenly you have modern politicians dealing with politicians who think like they do in the 1900s, and that's a different style. They have a different metric of value of life and different way of thinking. Could be a very interesting and worrying scenario. Hello, Tina Looker. Hello, Buzaski. Hello, Seneca Nero. Hello, Wayne Borian. Hello, Jonathan Burrow. Hello, DGB40. Hello, Frank Spelsato. Ooh. Dandrin, I'm scared that this is going to open with Dr. Clarke singing. I hope I didn't disappoint. Wayne Borian. So I suggested the triple DP turrets. I was thinking that fun it could have been if the tribals had been fitted with 4 triple 4.5 inch and the dual purpose guns. Wouldn't that be hilarious? It would have certainly been interesting. My thing is, if they're fitted with 4.5 inch, triple 4.5 inch guns, you might end up with 3 turrets rather than 4, or you could end up with the full 4 turrets. I'm not. It would depend on the way it's going, but I could also see such a dual purpose triple mount being used on C class cruisers, etc., to upgrade them, which gives you a very, very different C class cruiser for World War II. Hello, John Shea. Take a look up. Well, the Queen has been 17 years on the throne to say. Yes. George VI, yeah. Cool. Thanks for reminding. Dialing my earphones down a bit so I don't go deaf. Then again, isn't it only King Louis XIV who reigned longer? No. Elizabeth holds the record and she took it from Victoria, I think. Hello, Jess P. Good morning to you. Hello, Jessica Lou. How are you, cuz? Nice to carry from. Is it ridiculous to say some F-35 purchases were rigged tenders when the F-35 Lightning II meets the needs better than anything else that could have been offered? There are lots of people who like to say these things are rigged. The odds are they're probably not. There is a level of the rigging probably going on, but the rigging is not actually. What people don't realize is the rigging, it doesn't go on with selling the F-35. It goes on with the fact the F-35 is the only competition in town. People look at it the wrong way. It was rigged when you got all the countries to sign up and be part of it, and therefore no one else was producing aircraft which could oppose it. And that's the thing. And also, once someone's signed up to something, they're more likely going to buy it because they've signed up to it and already put money in. It's the sunk cost fallacy. So the fact is, you've eliminated opposition, and you've got the sunk cost fallacy going on. So you don't need to rig things. You don't need to bribe people. It's happened a long time ago. Mm-hmm. Alarm 16365. Not a wolf. You Brits have so much to teach us about with sarcasm and proper use. Yes. Well, you have to remember, as a national sport, sarcasm has reached for the British has reached a level of bottle fighting has in Glasgow. In that it is an art form. Wayne Boren, got to ask opinion. What do you think the impact would have been on the RN, RAN, and RCN if the tribals had been fitted with 4 triple 4.5 dual purpose turrets instead? I've actually been thinking about that a lot today since I read your comment, and I was thinking about it myself. And that's why I came up with, well, they might have had 3 rather than 4, because if they'd had 3, they'd have still had 9 guns, which would still been better than any other destroyer out there. And they could have carried 2 quintuple torpedo launchers. So they could have had 10 torpedoes able to be launched. And yeah. Broadly speaking, if you give the tribals treble 4.5 inch turrets in any scenario, that doesn't end well for anyone who fights them. Because let's say they're just doing 12 rounds per minute per gun, which is a sort of respectable thing they can do. You'd be looking at roughly 72 from the forward turrets alone in something like Narvik per minute. 72 shells a minute going up towards the Germans. That's a lot of firepower hitting destroyers. And the thing is, people go, well, that doesn't mean they won't necessarily all hit. No. But the odds, once you've got that level of firepower going upstream, and as long as they're being aimed in roughly the right direction by experienced, well-trained crews who know what they're doing, the odds are there are going to be a few of those rounds are going to hit. It's fun. Hello, Tanaverka. Hello, Yeldy Sage. Hello, Bugger8829. Frank Spider, that song was stuck in my head. I'm glad. Nice to everyone. Why did the Italians ban the Navy from having fixed-wing aviation until 1999? It feels like a stupid decision, akin to the idea of binning the RN aircraft carriers in the late 60s. Politics. John Shea, small question for Bill Trump 78. Did you have to look for what a F-14 would look like in modern techs? Yes, we did. All three of us have been looking at it. And at least two of us might have been going, while the other one was going, it never got built, so stop drooling. You can guess which one was which. Why not go straight when they went south? They were trying to look for the easiest ice to get through, and they thought that was the better way. Hello, Joseph. Hello, Frank Spotto. Ooh, again. Hello, in winter. Tackle Technical. Hello, even Alex. We're watching a few weeks now, and I got a question. Who is the Drac that keeps getting mentioned? Drac is Drakinefel. I call him Drac because we work together so often. And so that's who gets mentioned. It's Drakinefel. He has a YouTube channel, a far more famous one than me. And he's just an all-around really nice guy. Really good naval historian. Con Cameron, I've been reading about the legend of Drake's drum and the number of times it was supposedly sounded. Do any other country have something equivalent to that in military legends? Oh, the Spanish and the Portuguese have tons of military legends. But I think, honestly, if we're going for equivalent to that one, I think you want to look at some of the Russian legends. They're pretty big and pretty dark. Hi, Stephen Richards. Let's start with Frank Stoddard. Let's see. What would 3 more battles do? What would be 3 more battles add to this list of the most important naval history based on world impact, not ones that are just technical innovation? Frank Stoddard, Salamis, Diu, Lepanto, Chesapeake Bay, Trafalgar, Manila Bay, Tashima. I'd say Taranto and Midway need to be there. And probably let's see. Mm-hmm. Which one was it? Sorry about this. I'm trying to remember a name of a battle. Mm-hmm. Oh, come on, brain, work. The Battle of Grenada. It's not talked about much, but the Battle of Grenada from 1779 will be my third one. Sorry, it took me a while to remember, but I was going through going, no, it's not that one, not that one. So I'd say Salamis, do Lepanto, Chesapeake Bay, Trafalgar, Manila Bay, Tsushima, Grenada, Taranto, and Midway would be my. And that gets you up to 10. Jonathan. Andrew Paul. In a lecture about the Falklands given by Rear Admiral Chris Perry, he mentioned the Fearless and the Intrepid should have ideally been replaced with LHD-type vessels. That makes much more sense when seen in perspective of interoperability with the Quees as well. Yes. It would have been far more sensible, but instead they built HMS Ocean and then they built Albion and Bulwark. Tank says Drax is how I hear him say it. I say Drak, which is I say possibly, but usually it's Drak. Let's hear him. Why in the 1944 Lion design were the 16 5.25 inch switched for 12 4.5 inch guns? Probably ammunition storage, and they felt they could build 4.5 inch guns. Hello, Frank Spotto. Just speak. Oh, would 1905 USA be too busy freaking out about women and LGBTQ serving to appreciate what the 2022 fleet can do for them? Well, as I read it, the whole of America from today would go back to 1905, and America from the 1905 would come forward to today. So this is why I think there could be problems. But it could be interesting. I would certainly be have an impact on the current situation. Yes, Lou. Regarding last week's British-Ukraine Polish agreement, do you see any chance for the RN to help us keeping Polish seaports open in case of conflict? Honestly, no. There isn't a single Royal Navy warship I would like to send into the Baltic. Maybe not even the subs. It's a bit too shut off on. But the thing is, that's not what the Royal Navy's for in that circumstance. The Royal Navy is a long threat, and in the nicest way, in that circumstance, you probably get a Queen Elizabeth class loaded up with every single F-35 we can get, probably every single one they can get from the Brits and the Americans, maybe others. You possibly get both Queen Elizabeth class loaded up that, and whatever Atlantic carrier the Americans have available, and they probably get formed into a task group and sent north to test the Northern Barrier. Andrew report, C&D classes with triple 4.5s. Perhaps put the same turrets on onto the Dido as well. Axis aircraft would have a far more interesting time during their runs, to say the least. I think you probably leave, because of the advantages of the 5.25, you might well leave the Didos with the 5.25s, but they might be your 5.25 specialist ships. And if you've got a treble 4.5, it might well be the thing that you find on all your carriers, all your battleships, and Cs and Ds and destroyers. So they all have your 4.5s, and your specialist AA cruisers, your Didos, carry the 5.25s. It would be interesting. Let's see. For each major plane World War II, where would you place a nation's navy in terms of most to least powerful within a nation's branch of service? E.g., German Navy, weakest to Army and Air Force. Well, it depends. You see, on some grounds, you could probably say the Air Force is more powerful than the Royal Navy in the run-up to World War II. But there again, whenever the Royal Navy really pushes and wants something, it gets what it wants. When it wants the Fleet Air Arm to become the Royal Navies, it gets them. It loses the fight for the fighters, but that's because of basically all that's going on in the fall of France and the Battle of Britain that comes up. and they'd already been delayed. So the thing is, they wouldn't have lost the fight if the World War II hadn't started when it did. Royal Navy and Air Force, I'd say, roughly equal in run up to World War II. Army slightly behind them both. But the Army, you must remember, the British Army is the only fully mechanized and motorized army in the world at this point. It has got Horse units, but they're all in the Indian Army, so they claim they claim to be fully motorized and mechanized. In America, honestly, it's a toss-up to see which service is allowed least by the government. European powers, France, Army's on top, followed by Navy, followed by Air Force, probably. In Italy, Army, Air Force, Navy, despite Il Duce being the Navy minister. As you said, Germany's already the Navy's at the bottom of the list. Yeah. John South, what if during the Falklands War, Maggie decided to go for a slower approach to the reconquest and isolate the Falklands into supplies of subs and wait until the South American summer? The Americans would have tried to get involved and get peace negotiated. That was also one of the things running down the time. There's only so long you could actually keep the Americans from trying to negotiate world peace. And could the Vanguard have been fitted with 4 triple turrets with 15-inch guns, but utilizing a revised Nelson class turrets? Now, if you said 16-inch guns, they can use they could use Nelson class turrets. The thing is, they're using stuff which is off the shelf for the Vanguard, so they're not designed for other things. If they'd had treble turrets going around spare, they'd have been treble 16. So if they had, let's say, some spare treble 16 turrets, 16-inch turrets going around, Vanguard probably would have been designed for them, which would have been fun. So anyway, what would the US do with the Great White Fleet in that situation? What would Britain's reaction be? Britain would be going, oh, sugar, we're now the major naval power in NATO because we have 2 carriers, not because we have a lot of ships. And the Americans would be going, what do we do with ships? I think we need to, I have no idea. Put them in museums? Build something rapidly? How would you how much would things change if the US Navy started with the 6 first rates instead of the original 6 frigates? You wouldn't have frigates being on station from the Royal Navy. You see, look, the US Navy has frigates, so the Royal Navy sends out frigates. The fact that the Royal Navy's frigates are frigates produced by a power which has a huge number of third rates, etc., and relies on them for a lot of their duties and a lot of their missions, whereas the American set of frigates are basically the biggest and bestest frigates you can build, has an impact on the early operations. If the Americans have built 6 first rates, then the Royal Navy will expect a battle squadron action and will have had a battle squadron out there deployed. So you probably would have, it might well not be first rates, but you could well have a couple of second rates and half dozen to a dozen of third rates out there. That could well be what the Royal Navy put into service to go out to the North America West Indies station. And it would be an interesting battle because the American first rates would be probably well handled and very good, well built. But there is the fact again that if they're against second and third rates in sufficient enough numbers that which the Royal Navy would probably supply, that the Royal Navy could double up on them, then they probably win. Painful though. John South, as by then Arc Royal be complete, there's a good chance Tiger and Blake could be brought back. Possibly. Nice around. How many VLS tubes can be fitted to a Vanguard's nuclear ballistic missile submarine in messaging conversion? I did once work out that you could slot in 12 slots into the 12 Talam slots into the space of the tube. I cannot remember the actual maths that went into that, but I did a lot of work on it, so I'm presuming it's still right. I think when it comes to hypersonics, that's slightly less. I think they can fit roughly 5, depending on how they put them, how they space them out. It could be as little as 4 or 3 if they make them really a mash of a job. Regular Doug Clarke, since following you, I've really noticed the poor quality and accuracies in big production documentaries. My perspective was when they are talking about talking about one aircraft, and they show a different one talking about zeros, and they show planes with fixed landing gear taking off a carrier. Yeah, that's something they do. Jamie's fun to have one around for those ones. But in winter, could our Royal Navy keep the Type 23 instead of selling off, or would we not get much for them, but would allow them to keep more ships in active fleet? Honestly, some of them could probably be kept going in a reserves fleet if we built a reserve fleet around them, but it's not going to be the full 13. It's about 5 or 6 of the hulls, I think, are probably in good enough condition to do that. But they'd have to have a full refit, and that's going to cost money. So, how many VLS tubes could you fit on a Vanguard class battleship? Well, if I took out, let's say, just use the stern, I could probably get in 128 or plus. Plus or minus 16. If I just use the turret spaces in the stern. John Barrett, your thoughts on the La Fantastique class super destroyers? They're in my book, I think, but I am not as enamored with them as their name is. If the IGN did not pose a serious risk for the USN by November 43, would it be appropriate to think that the USN would need a fleet of old battleships, CVs, and whatever cruisers, destroyers survive Guadalcanal, limited newer vessels making up the combined fleet? There is a theoretical idea, but they're all getting worn out and they're all getting very, very tired. So yeah, I don't think so. I think some of the reason you're building new ships is to replace the old ships because they are so worn after years of service and wartime. Hello. In winter, are there any plans to build modern British versions of the ram mountings using new missiles? No. The rolling airframe missile is a lovely weapon, but it's not something which the British are really interested in because there's a logistical requirement. And the thing is, it's another missile you can take on. They'd rather use the space for sea scepters and the money to get as many sea scepters in the fleet as possible. The Royal Racer, hello. Is there any particular theme to speak to Bruships, or is this just a general naval chat? It's a bit of a naval chat. I've got one good book for it for you all. It's going to sound strange. I have other books on order, but only one book has actually arrived. And that's life sometimes in the big city. But it's a rather gorgeous book I'll be getting to in a bit, which is this one. Balkan's Victory. Alan Smith. It's about the HMS Victory prior to the one which you can go and see in Portsmouth. And one of her captains. And it's a gorgeous looking book. But I'll be getting to that in a bit. And it should be called 69 The Decider, because there's also... Yeah, The Decider. Because we're also going to discuss the options for Patreon vote, which I'm going to be putting up. I'm going to be making go live after the night's live. So the patron vote will be going live after tonight's live. Fun. So I'll be discussing that in a bit as well. But guys, were the Lion class battleships to use the same guns and main turrets on the Nelson class? And if they were there any plans to put the Nelson and Rodney turrets on the first two lines? No, for the no for everything in that one. The Nelson and Rodney would have served alongside the lines, so they wouldn't have lost their turrets. They were designing improved turrets, so they were based on the Nelson's turrets, but better, and the same with the guns. The guns were based on the Nelson's guns, but better. Just how surprised Jutland wasn't on their list. Jutland is important because of what didn't happen at Jutland more than what did happen at Jutland. Frank Sonner, let's see. Was South Africa very sparsely populated when it was finally colonized? Not as much as as some people would like to make out, but not as heavily populated as others would like to believe. It was a point in the middle. As Dan Broom says, colonized by who? There were a lot of colonizations of South Africa, but yeah. Frank Sonner, let's see. What was important about the Battle of Grenada? The French beat the British. And it was during the American War for Independence. Tim Richards, just reading New Zealand by Matthew Wright. Was there any way the Kiwis could have kept her after World War I? Well, if they'd chosen to afford to, they could have done, but they'd also have had to make sure there was treaty allowance for them. So that's the problem. It's the treaty allowance. And the fact is, she's always sort of New Zealand, but not New Zealand. Hello, Ian Stradling. Senator 4-inch, 4.25, 4.5. Was there a set 4.75 used around used? And how nightmarish were the logistics here? The Royal Navy had 4-inch, 5.25, 4.5, and 4.7. So, yeah, the logistics was fun. Shomak, the triple 4.5-inch reminded me of USN concept for what is basically a dual-purpose Cleveland with the autoloader that Worcester had with when everything needs to die. Yeah, that would work. Let's hear him. The USN 35 that crashed weeks ago. From the footage I've seen, it looks like a classic unstabilized approach as they were wave off and power calls before the 35 crashed. Maybe. Anyway, could you put the 5.25 in triple 6-inch turrets as good AA guns? Well, theoretically, you've got the space in a triple 6 turret. But a triple 6 turret is not designed to move as fast or angle up as high as the 5.25s. So that's your problems. You need to modify it a lot for it to be a decent AA turret. You need to make it faster in its axis, more precise in its axis, and you need to have it a greater range of elevation. And depression, strange enough. So anyway, how often did ships get loaded wrong ammo? No, the Royal Navy was actually fairly good at not getting the wrong ammo. Quite correct, I know, Paul. For anyone in the chat, if you could make an alignment chart for the Cruiser World War II, which one would you say is lawful good, lawful neutral, and lawful evil? Neutral good, neutral true neutral, neutral evil, chaotic good, chaotic neutral, chaotic evil. True neutral. Oh, good lord. I'm not sure. I'm just thinking through the classes of cruisers, and pretty much every single class of cruiser I'm coming up with is going into either chaotic good, chaotic evil, or lawful neutral. I don't think I've managed to get a single one into the neutral category in my head yet. So, I mean, what would 1905 Britain do if they got wind of the modern US Navy's capabilities? A lot of work. Hello, Michael Patton. Hello, there's the Foxo. Okay, how did the first USS Pennsylvania and the other 30 US first rates compare to their counterpart contemporaries? They were very good. They were fine ships as first rates go. They were fine ships for first rates. And the Royal Navy would have been very happy to adopt them. They would have probably swarmed them with third rates because they would worry more. They'd presumed that handling a first rate is a lot more difficult than handling a frigate, because a frigate and a merchant ship are similar enough that you can transpose some experience. You can gain some experience doing that, but a first rate is a far more different thing to man, crew, and command. Or is it? That's interesting. The Americans only managed to slot 7 Talum into a SLVM tube, publicly at least. Well, it's the it's the theoretical versus it's how you cram it in. That's basically does said. I came up to 12 because I was doing 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. And also, there is a slightly different command and control setup in a British submarine to an American submarine, which I felt would enable them to do it with less of the instrumentation that the Americans had to stick into their design. But that was me making a judgment call based on publicly available information. Andrew Reynolds, hypothetically, HMS Eagle is too far along to convert to a carrier. How would that change things going forward through World War I and World War II? The British probably get another ship as a carrier. The question is what? My guess would be an Admiral class because they're the next best hulls available. But there's also the option that you could have used one of the R class. So you could have ended up with an R class converted to battle cruiser / carrier level. Which would be interesting. It would either be an R class or it would be an Admiral class as a carrier. This Fox, if the Iron had started light fleet carrier program and given them priority over full CVs in 1938, what would the effect of these ships on the be over the in real life carriers? So basically, if you're saying that instead of just ordering HMS Unicorn, they'd ordered Unicorn plus PALs. And the trouble was they gave no carriers priority. That's what happens. In 1939, Bright Spark, Winston Churchill, in one of his... I like him on some occasions. On other occasions, I do find him something... He stops... in the face of admirals going, yes, we agree, capital construction, ship construction, pause, sensible. Carrier construction, we'd like to carry on. No, we'll pause that as well. If he doesn't pause, basically, if he doesn't pause the light carriers, if he goes, oh no, you've got these 4 light fleet carriers, we'll keep those going. They're useful. They're smaller air groups, but they're useful. They're more carriers. They're more flight decks. So that's your advantage. It's more flight decks. So let's say you get an Illustrious and a Unicorn in at Taranto. Well, that's an extra extra squadron of Swordfish at least, maybe more. It's in the strike. It's useful. What would exactly happen? Well, that would take a while to work out, but that's not even exact. It's a case of what's these likely permutations of what the information that occurs. But the reality is, if you have light fleet carriers available in sufficient numbers from 1940 onwards, then that affects the convoy war, that affects a lot of operations, and it probably means there's a light fleet carrier available to go out with Force Z. And that could be certainly provide enough air defense for them to break up the strikes coming in. Was it just too late for MV Carnarvon Castle to be converted into an escort carrier? Yep. Carl Gasberg, at 35 minutes. Speaking of books, have you had time to look into Sailor of Austria? Not yet. I have it, but I haven't had time to look into it. Angela Paul, had I just somehow survived till 1982, what role, if any, would she have had in the Falklands? What would have been her fate around the time? A museum, being a smaller ship, or the Breaks Yard? Probably a museum if she was still available. But if she's taken to the Falklands, you could get her down there. It's going to be interesting, but you could get her down there, in which case 15-inch gunfire for naval gunfire support. So she'd be sitting in San Carlos Bay blasting away. Kevin, good evening, Darcy. Hello, Kevin. You go back in time and are hosted as a guest of honor at a peaceful dinner by each of the one or two Allied Axis navies based on your culinary alcohol tastes. Which three do you pick and why? A peaceful dinner, one or two Allied Axis navies. Well, don't take this the wrong way, but the only Axis navy I'm interested in having a meal with is the Italians because, well, let's be honest. As much as I love Japanese food, I'm not sure how long I'll be able to keep. I'll keep safe with the Japanese, but the Italian food, I always like pasta. I quite enjoy pasta meals. Not too keen on wine and everything, but I'll take the pasta. And the cheese. Oh, the cheese. American will be other Navy as long as they allow me to have Tex-Mex for dinner. And I'll go back in time to the Royal Navy mainly so I can send them home and say, going, build some freaking carriers! And probably build more tribals. There's a Foxer. Hello, thank you for Super Chat. Super Chats are always very welcome, especially as my inkling, and I will be open about this with everyone in a moment, is that I am going to end up having to pay my way to Canada, which I don't mind. But I have a feeling the funders are hoping they're going to fund me, but I'm not sure how much money, if any, they're actually going to be able to provide. They were talking about providing the loss at the beginning, but judging by some of the emails I received, and they're trying their best, they've got a lot of financial commitments. So I have a feeling I will be having to fund myself, but I still want to host a talking event and sort that out. And if they do want to do that, then as long as I can find the money I need to be there to get there and to get there in terms of getting there and getting the time to get some time in the archives as well as going around the ships, because that's the thing. It's not just going around the ships. It's got to be the archive visits as well, going into the archives and getting to look at the records to make it worthwhile. That's usually where the money comes in. It's the archives which cost the money, not the ships. Ships are cute. Archives are paperwork just going to fool me. If Churchill got his wish and the Allies invaded Norway and some North Africa, how do you see that operation going along? And do you think that would have a bigger impact on the war than Torch? If the Allies invaded Norway rather than North Africa, it becomes a very interesting war. Because if they are just to reach a stalemate in there, they're going to be doing a whole different fighting. But it's going to change things. You could also end up having a front where you have Soviet troops coming round because the Soviets could send them through Norway to support the Allies going south. So you could end up with a front which actually has, I don't know, Khrushchev and, you know, oh, I'm just thinking about it. If you have Khrushchev, Patton, and Montgomery both all in charge of divisions racing against each other, yeah, that would be quite fun. But leaving that to one side, uh, you can theoretically argue that, and you could just do a reinforcement of Monty's forces in North Africa and have them just continue pushing along instead of going through French North Africa. And you could take out Norway. And if you do, even if you don't take out, you're going to draw so many German troops, you're going to weaken them on the Eastern Front dramatically. Or the Germans have to abandon Norway. And in which case, if they abandon Norway, then you can base bombers there and you can blast away at anything that moves in the Baltic. So you can cut them off from their supplies from Sweden. Their iron ore will no longer be going to. They will no longer be getting iron ore and anything from Sweden. And you can bomb them to your heart's content from Norway. And your bombers now, imagine American day bombers American day bombers and British night bombers flying from Norway. It's basically a straight hop straight into the heart of Germany. It's not good. It would be difficult to see. It would be interesting to see how they supply it, but they could, and that also would mean they could cut off supplies. They could cut off submarines from getting into the North Atlantic. They could change the entire Battle Atlantic in one go. The Raw Writer. How capable is the Soviet Air Force of attacking fleets in the early 1950s? Assuming conventional conflict, would NATO fleets be able to organically repulse Soviet air attack? Yes, in the 1950s. In the 1950s. Current scout training done, research done, time for chilling evening. That's good. Ian Winter. Ian Winter, that's the victory that's found the week I was in the channel. That she had 64 panels. Yes. Andrew, response about the Eagle being too far ahead. Photographs of Rodney seem to indicate she was quite ideally suited for conversion to a carrier when work on her stopped. It would certainly be one of the I would argue one of the R class or the either remaining R class or one of the Admiral class. And yeah, Rodney is an option. Jeffrey and Howe. I have a feeling it's going to sound strange, but you might get a scenario where the British go, well, we'll make Dun our one off and we'll do the other three will be Admiral class. Especially when they get two conversions in the Washington Naval Treaty, because it makes more sense to have all your ships of one class, and that could be interesting. Britain having 3 Admiral class. It'll be interesting to see how they do it. Let's put it this way: it'd be interesting to see how they do it. 9681 saw a person outside of the US and Japan. Nobody in the West is thinking on ASW planes as an important asset because the submarine warfare of Cold War is not an issue anymore. Is that ridiculous? Yep. Why do you think we're all buying them? Hello. Hmm. Carmen, careful now. You give me an idea. The RN an idea of 15-inch monitor. They did like the 15-inch monitors. Actually, everyone, if the UK were designing the Gerald Fords, other than the key bridges, how do they approach the issues that the USN has found itself up against? Well, the USN with the Fords has tried to introduce about 8 new technologies, and the RN would tell you that what you do is you never introduce more than 2 at a time. So they would probably have cut it down and have gone a batch of 2 built with 2 new technologies, then 2 built with 2 more new technologies, and upgraded the previous 2 to the new tech, and then a next batch would be 2 more technologies. So instead of them, they'd have introduced the upgrades, more slowly, but that's because the RN is more risk adverse when it comes to procurement than the US Navy is, because they tend to have less ships. They have to be and a smaller budget, and they don't sell on the rule of cool. They sell on the this is what we really, really, absolutely freaking need. Please don't cut it. And to be honest, if ships could talk, which ones would you most want to talk with? Any of those? Warspite would be quite fun. And as I said, any of those in my book. Which, by the way, thank you for buying. I still haven't received any royalties from it, from Pen and Sword yet, but that's, I'm sure, will come at some point. But if enough people have bought them, that's always hope. But thank you everyone who has been buying Tribals, Battles, and Darings. And thank you to everyone who's been leaving such wonderful reviews on Amazon, etc. It's been very kind of you. Thank you. Hello, Nook. That's what it looks like. Sounds familiar. It starts with, well, we'll pay for everything. Ends with, we'll cover the social pack costs that the person you're covering for already paid for. In my experience, the people, and I always say this, the people that they approach you, they want to pay for everything, and then they have to apply to their people who are supposed to fund them, and they have to put in the budget, and everyone tries to cut everything. Then I think we should exclude a few from Dr. Clarke's and just like all the Tribals, Battles, and Darings, Warspite, Renown should be good for a chat. Yeah, Renown. Oh, the conversation you could have with Renown. Oh, let's be honest. Atra's Renown will be, and I just missed them, and I just missed them, and I just missed them. Oh no, Rodney. I had Gneisenau banged to rights. I was so close. But no, you didn't give me the power. You only gave me 2 screws, 2 shafts. If you give me a 3rd screw, a 3rd shaft, and you give me another engine, another turbine to power me along, I would have got Gneisenau for you. I would have been victorious. And Nelson sitting over the other side of the quay going, Rodney, shut up. Shut up. You're annoying me. Shut up. Thank you, Phil Williams. Thank you. It's very kind of you. Resources aside, you're tasked to raise any British battleship post Age of its devastation. Every question aside, which one would be most feasible? Probably Royal Oak. Probably, it's going to sound terrible. She's in the middle of Scarpa Flow. And they have got quite a lot of data about her, thanks to the work of people like Emily Turton. So maybe I would go, if I'm going to pick anyone, the easiest one probably is Royal Oak. It's not easy, but it's relatively, compared to other options, easier. Wayne I'm sorry, Battle Samar, replace the USDDs with troubles. Doesn't make any difference. Yes and no. if you do have 7 fleet destroyers instead of 4 destroyer escorts and 3 destroyers, you are going to probably do slightly better. But honestly, not much better considering what they managed to do. The USN for two escort carriers sunk, 2 destroyers sunk, and a destroyer escort sunk, managed to sink 3 heavy cruisers, 3 damage-free heavy cruisers, and damage a destroyer. So they do well. Tribals, would they do better? Probably they do about the same. They have more gun firepower, but they have less torpedoes. Than the Americans' big destroyers. They have more firepower than the destroyer escorts. So again, if you're having 7 fully worked up fleet destroyers, though, it was like saying if you had 7 fully worked up American destroyers, they would, do a lot more damage. That's good. I'm tending towards the Edinburgh subclass or the town class for lawful good. Really? You think cheeky HMS Belfast is lawful good? Andrew, alternative question. Based on discussion, one foot. In April 1945, sees HMS Renown fully rebuilt and afresh as per modern standards, and Vanguard having vanished. How is her service? Fully rebuilt and afresh as per modern standards. How is her service? Well, she probably serves the same time as Vanguard. Maybe even a little longer than Vanguard because, well, Renown would have space to modify things. And she could be useful. She's also, if she's fully rebuilt anew and afresh, she's been around since World War One. So if she makes it to the 1960s, she's grandfathered in. So she only has to make it to about 1961, and she might well be reserved as a museum ship because she'll have been around long enough to be my grandfather's ship, if that makes sense, and possibly my great grandfather's ship. Second, what commissioned ship in the Iron has the most battle irons as they go with the name? Warspite. By 1. There are 2 destroyers and a light cruiser tied for 3rd. World War II, including HMS Nubian. 2 destroyers and a light cruiser tied for 2nd. I mean, and that's right. As for commissioned ships, currently in service with the Royal Navy, well, Dreadnought's not in service yet, so that one's out. It's being constructed. It's on the orders on construction, but it's not being in service yet. Glasgow isn't in the water yet, but that'll be pretty high up there. Might actually be Prince of Wales, because Prince of Wales is an old name. It might be Prince of Wales. Or Diamond. It's going to be between Prince of Wales and Diamond, I'd think. That's from memory, though, not from checking the books. because the books are up in my bedroom. If you had a chat with HMS Eskimo, you might get a new and very interesting view on nose jobs. Yes. Oh, you have had a nose job. That's fine. That's what we all do, isn't it? Anak, USN originally wanted to approach tech development for Ford more slowly. Second event, Rumsfeld pushed them to develop it all at once. Well, yes, Rumsfeld managed to muck up the LCS, the Fords, and the Zulmalts. I'm sorry to hear that, George Newman. Still waiting on TBD from Amazon. We'll get there soon. Dagdon, hello, 12. Dagdon 12. Could there be an argument made that the Anglo-German naval arms race was one of the largest wasted resources in human history of gun procurement programs? Well, for starters, it wasn't an Anglo-German one. There was other nations involved, as I said before. There are the Italians, the Americans, the Japanese, the Russians to extent, and the French. All involved in their races. Plus, there's a South American arms race going on. Really, it's the races that it's on the German side because the British have to. The British cannot afford for a large fleet because if they do, they lose. So for the British, it's essential to do it. For the Germans, it's a choice. And if it's a choice if they hadn't made, they probably have ended up fighting World War I versus Russia and France, but not against Britain. Because Britain's only going to go to war if you invade Belgium. And if you can keep your mitts off Belgium, because that's the only place which has the decent bays to invade Britain from, and if you can leave Belgium alone, then Britain's not going, and you don't have a navy, Britain's going to ignore you. So you can argue it's it's a waste, but it's only a waste from one side, because one side doesn't have a choice. One side has to win it for their survival. For at that time, when you're talking about naval power, Britain, the British Empire, everything is entirely dependent upon naval power. If you do not have supremacy of naval power, you do not have Britain. So that's what they're going to focus on. Whereas for the Germans, naval power is a choice. For Britain, it's an essential need. Dandrian, would Nelson and Rodney be like an old married couple of siblings? Probably somewhere in between. Siblings, but they've been around each other for sort of their whole lives, so to an extent, squabbling away a bit. Like an old married couple. But okay, what kind of submarine, what ship or submarine currently in active service is the most decorated in the world? Ooh. Well, the Yanks don't have an Enterprise in service at the moment. And we don't have a Warspite in service at the moment. The French don't have any of their big... They don't have a Gloire or anything in service at the moment. I'm going through the Italian and Spanish names. I think it could go back to Prince of Wales, honestly. It could. It would be funny if the anthropomorphized ships and Rodney, Nelson, and Hood had the personalities of their human namesakes. Oh, good lord. Just think of what would happen to the world if they did. Imagine if that was the way the British, got the AIs, like it was sort of something out of Andromeda. Yes, the AI downloaded into the ship is Admiral Lord Nelson. Hello. The AI downloaded into your ship is Admiral Lord Rodney. Hello. The AI downloaded into your ship is Admiral Lord Hood. Hello. I have swords. There's a Foxer, HMS Andrew, back in Sagaba Fro. Back in my day. Dr. C, I just found an image on Discord that shows the alignment me that found the spark this idea. I will check it out in a bit. Hello, Miles McCaskill. That's the Foxer. You didn't answer my super chat. In your opinion, what is the defining feature of the pre-Dreadnought? I didn't answer your super chat. I thought I did. I said thank you for it, but did I not answer it? In your opinion, what is the defining feature of the Super Dreadnought? Sort of like how the Dreadnought had a uniform central battery. My defining feature of the central battle of the pre-Dreadnought is probably... honestly, it's probably the layout. Big guns, followed by rapid-firing guns of about half the size of it. It has the big guns to fire at long range, but really what it is about is closing and hammering away at short range. Sorry about that. So it's the central battery of these casemate guns and the turrets at either end. That tells him missed him by this much. Yeah, that'd be Rodney, or rather missed her because well, no, hang on, no, Rodney, etc. And all the ships. They'd also be an interesting thing because all British ships are female. So that could cause the AI personalities some interesting questions. But there again, maybe not. It'd be an interesting one to discuss. Male AI and personality, but we refer to the ship as female. It would be interesting to get that one right. That's good. If Rumsfeld wanted something to be done one way, that's the best argument to do things the other way. Probably. When boring, now some minded scientists. Rodney would have some stories to tell, but I'd really love to hear Warspite's view on the Battle of Narvik. Those freaking tribals kept getting there in front of me. I was trying. I wanted to ram into Narvik Harbour, and Cossack goes and does it first. It's just wrong. Yeah, we could all hear it. That's good. I was taking the lawful chaotic aspect of how they followed what a cruiser should be, and good evil on how they looked. By those metrics, Belfast is lawful good. Royal Router. World War II battleships had a nasty habit of breaking their radar sets when firing main batteries in combat. What precautions did each navy take to prevent that from happening? As things developed, they tried to basically put early versions of shock absorbers on them. 9683 wasn't sure if your answer is the result Mirage 4, an unsuitable plane for an interceptor and a carrier-based maritime strike roles. There apparently were plans to do so. It would have required a lot of investing to make it viable. And general battle honors for single ships in World War II. Warspite had 15, one from World War I, followed by Orion, Nubian, and Jarvis, each with 13, and then Tartar with 12. And general, the name Diamond has 16 battles honors, while the name Prince of Wales has 5 battle honors. The answer is probably Diamond. Yeah, but... Are you sure Prince of Wales only has 5 battle honors? Probably Diamond, though. I thought Prince of Wales had more than that. Or does it have a habit of getting sunk in the battles, so not actually getting the credit for them? That's interesting, but if Renown was preserved, would Belfast not be turned into a museum ship since they had a nice big one? Or would they gather enough funds to preserve both? Probably both, because if Belfast still survived as long as she did, she'd again become a grandfather in, so you'd have both of them preserved, probably. Which would be quite nice. Renown and Belfast preserved would be quite cool. For example, what would be swords for a battleship? Oh, I'm just worrying about that one. Seneca, the AI download on your ship is Admiral Beatty. Oh, why would you do that? Why? 681. How plausible is it that Bern and Gascon would have been Befrem frigates? If they build enough of them, there's always a chance. Honourable, is it understandable why HMS Jellicoe and HMS Beatty were renamed to be HMS Anson and Howe in the 1930s? But why hasn't there been an HMS Jellicoe as of yet? If I'm not mistaken, the only ship which has been named after an admiral to have been built since World War II is HMS Duncan. Named after a Scottish admiral, so, yeah. Andrew or Fisher or Twirt, or something along those lines about him. HMS Duncan's the only one which has passed the politics test. Doug Clarke, your conversations between Nelson Rodney and Sentient Warships has me wondering if you should start writing some manner of fiction. I do occasionally consider it, but I think I'm going to leave it to people like Glyn Stewart, who are far better than I am. For example, the AI sort of wives of the admirals. Oh, why would you put the poor wives through that? Didn't they suffer enough while they were alive? Anok. And Wayne Warren, ships are female because we borrowed the word from Latin. Latin is a gender language. Yes and no. Britain regards, and the tradition goes, that ships are female is because they carry life. They carry life, therefore they're female. Anok, battle honours for USN ships are retired when ship is decommissioned. They don't get carried forward to follow on their namesakes. I know they're not supposed to, but I would challenge anyone to try and tell USS Enterprise she shouldn't have the battle honours all her namesakes have had previously. If you want to have that argument with USS Enterprise, please, Anok, go ahead and do it. Myself, I will keep at a respectful, safe distance behind several feet of concrete and armor class steel. Take care, Warren Boring. Female. There are a few EVE Online flight records with female fleet commander voice commands recorded. Cool. That's right. I thought it was because ships carried life. Yeah, that's the one I know. And that's what my dad always said. And is written down in some very old books as being no reason they were classed as she's. Shamak, for battleships, LG Washington, LN Lawful Good Washington, Lawful Neutral Vittorio Veneto, Lawful Evil Bismarck, Neutral Good Rodney, TN, True Neutral Tirpitz, Neutral Evil Karashima, Chaotic Good Warspite, yes, we'll agree with that. Chaotic Neutral South Dakota, and Chaotic Evil Mutsu. I think you're being a bit cruel. The Japanese ones are all on the evil spectrum. They're not there. They're not all evil. Here's what I see. As far as I can tell, the ship with the oldest name in service is Dragon. 15 honours. Yeah, Dragon, of course. I always forget she has as many honours as she does, because she hops around so much on different types of ships. Thank you, Greg. And thank you, Report, for going checking me on that one. There's Zatsky. No, we're not getting into that one. A, only boy and 40 cousins. B, don't fight with them. They will take you out. Rapper Razorback. If ship AI, I take on personality and namesake. We cannot have any ships named Vian, Drake, Nelson, Burke, Cunningham, or Lee. Don't you want an Admiral Lee? Come on, that'd be fun. An HMS Vian would be just. Oh. HMS Vian. Oh, good lord. Oh, that would be fun. Andrew Barrel on Prince are St. Lucia, Groy Island, Darnells, Bismarck, and Malta convoys. Ken, why is the only sub versus sub underwater kill by HMS Victoria so unknown these days, considering there was an amazing amount of calculations performed to get the kill and there was no modern tech? Principally because of that. There's nothing, it's all hard work and boring calculations. There's nothing sexy about it. No, they used this brand new piece of technology and they achieved it. We actually have to credit people for fallible things. As Fox said, the Battle of Jutland does not happen due to a more cautious German admiralty, and the Dreadnoughts don't get their day in the sun. What effect does this have on naval development? Do they fade away? No. No, it's like sort of the Battle of Tsushima. If the Battle of Tsushima didn't happen, battleships aren't going anywhere. Battleships are around because they are the best method of killing other ships. If Jutland doesn't happen, then the Royal Navy then has its fixed in, and Britain has its fixed in that the best way to not have to fight an enemy battle fleet is to have an overwhelming preponderance of power. In which case, if Jutland doesn't happen, then probably the Washington naval treaties don't happen, because Britain won't want to be in a position of being so weak. Let's see. The US Portland still carries the battle honors of the namesakes. Even the current one is supposed to be the other Portland. That sounds sensible to me. We're not getting into that from Dan Freeman. Admiral Lee being in a 1970s American muscle car, he'd be just so disappointed. You're going, where are the guns on this? That's good. An AI Admiral Lee would fire a single salvo at the beginning of the war. A couple of hours later, a phone call comes in. Well, our entire company's dead, so you win. I'm not quite sure he'd be that effective, but he'd certainly give it a go. The Yickers, I'm getting an oil change, and the driver's window's open. They looked at me strange when he started laughing. I'm glad. I don't know. Just being referred to as female give captains the opportunity to sound chivalrous. Seneca, US Lee would probably be able to hit the dinghy as it is towing as a target while aiming in the other direction. So if it hits it while running once around the world. Seneca, what about the Dutch admiral that went off with the part of the British Navy? Would a ship AI with his name just be as dangerous as Drake and the rest listed? Yes. Who was Admiral Hood? Admiral Hurry. Well, Admiral Hood is a special kind of soul. Admiral Samuel Hood. Or some, Let's see if I can get his picture up. And if I give you a list of battles, he did the raid on Le Havre, he did the Battle of Chesapeake, the Battle of Saints, the Battle of Mont Passage, the Siege of Toulon, and the invasion of Corsica. He also had another brother called Alexander Hood, who was also quite an accomplished officer, and Vice Admiral Sir Samuel Hood, who was another fairly successful officer who was a cousin of his. Bum-ba-dum. And let's see if I can edit this to add in Hood. This is Hood. A very good nose on this picture, this painting. An incredibly good nose. Let's see. Anything else you'll need to know? Fought in the 7 Years' War. Fought in the American Revolutionary War. Fought in the French Revolutionary War. He's done a lot of did a lot of service and was a very successful officer in the Royal Navy's terms. He was pretty critical for training up quite a lot of the future admirals of the Royal Navy and making sure they had success. He's one of those officers who does a lot of the rule breaking first, so later ones following on from him can do so. Most famous battle is probably the Battle of Chesapeake, but the Battle of Saint should also be remembered. Although in that battle, he was technically under the commander. He was under Rodney. The Battle of Chesapeake, he was under the command of Thomas Graves. So, that was fun. And it was at the Battle of Mona Passage where he became acquainted with Horatio Nelson. And it was Hood who introduced Nelson to the Duke of Clarence and various other people in order to promote Nelson up the ranks. So this is, in many ways, one of Nelson's mentors. He's cool. So, Admiral Hood, do you have any slightest idea how that little narrows it down? Well, let's give you option of 3. I'm waiting on a book on German Schnellboats, E-boats. Any recommendations for books on their allied counterparts? There's a whole series slowly coming out on coastal vessels, on coastal torpedo boats, etc., which I've got some parts of. For Allied coastal forces, if you want the good ones, they're not cheap. I have to admit, the books. They are really not cheap. I'm going to emphasize that one. But these by John Lambert and Al Ross. Allied Coastal Forces of World War II, Volumes 1, 2, and I think there's a Volume 3 coming. This has got the Fairmile designs and the US submarine chasers in them, and this has the Vosper MTBs and the US Elcos. They are good books. Oh. Ooh. Okay, if I can put that book into that hole in there, then that should straighten that all up. Yes. Oh, hey, in it goes. You start to realise the books are becoming structurally integral to the entire building. That's when you sort of think, well, maybe I need to buy more books. I do. I always need to buy more books. Right. You go back to there. You go back in front. and you go back up there. Good. Right. Oh, that was fun. Thanks to Clearon. I know you've probably seen Hawker Siddeley HS745 COD proposal left in the comments. This is based on the Series 2 airliner. Does the choice of airframe kill the idea? To an extent. They need to do a lot of work to get that airframe fine. Hello, Night Hen Productions. First of all, hi. It's the 1920s. Everything is panned out exactly the same in the world as it does in ours. But the treaty systems do not come to pass, i.e. next to no restrictions. How big can the RN and USN afford to be? Number of capital ships? Well, the USN and RN probably get into a slow constructing process of capital ships. They probably both end up roughly in the 20s. I.e. not much bigger than the existing were, but in 20s. And they probably end up having what is more of a tech race than a numbers race. In fact, the USN might even let the RN functionally have more ships than they do by maintaining starting to build a reserve fleet. Because the RN will be looking for a free fleet, basically a free fleet formation, as Jellicoe was looking at, and they probably would be looking at having about 8 capital ships in each force. So yeah, that's what we're looking at. And you look at you probably find battleship-centric Mediterranean force and a mixed battleship, battle cruiser force in the Indian Ocean and in the North Atlantic, in the home fleet for the RN. USN probably build the Lexingtons, but then don't build any more battle cruisers. They probably concentrate on the battleships and slowly build them. So basically, the USN would be churning out. They would carry on churning out ships much like they had with the standard class, at that sort of rate, which they could afford and they could get the permission to do and get support for it. So you probably have what we call the new standards, which would be 24 knot, 25 knot speed, and they build everything up to them. The 16-inch guns. The RN would slowly probably phase out 15-inch gunships for bigger gunships. Again, we'll probably end up with most things being 16-inch. Maybe they both have a couple of classes of 18-inch vessels. The Japanese Navy may try and keep up, but probably would end up going bankrupt. It's an interesting question. If you don't have the treaties, you don't have... Well... Okay, if you don't have the treaties, you don't have both the cap and the incentive to build up for both the US Navy and the Royal Navy. So it depends on how much their governments weigh support of navies. Now, the interesting thing is, if you don't have the treaty limitations and you have the giant economic recession that comes up in the UK, the British government might well, as they might well take the traditional policy of let's build ships as a way to help keeping us out of having problems in the recession. So you might see the Royal Navy go through a bit of a renaissance of capital ship construction in the 1920s, etc., because of the recession. It'll be interesting to see. But probably both would end up in their 20s. RN 24 to 27, USN probably between 22 and 24. Andrew Paul, didn't Vice Admiral Nelson consider Admiral Hood his mentor? He did, but let's be honest, to be more practical extent, Jervis was his mentor, but Hood certainly had an impact on him. Main interesting thing would be aircraft carrier construction. I'm fairly certain you might actually be looking at the third or even fourth generation of aircraft carriers by the time you get to World War II. Because the thing is, aircraft carriers without having armor, but allowing you to build things like capital ship style engines and turbines, you can keep a lot, and secondary weapons, you can keep a lot of industry going by building an aircraft carrier quite cheaply. Aircraft carriers are a lot cheaper to build than a battleship in the 20s and 30s. But do you think the USN would be better off if they still had their own shipyards instead of selling all their solely relying on private shipyards? I think the USN, to an extent, has enough diversity of procurement options that it's okay. I think for smaller navies, there's more of a problem. I think for the USN, they could run into trouble, but I think, yeah. What if USS Hood had turned at 9 miles and kept going to 8 miles before turning? It could have, couldn't have. It all depends on so much small things happening that, there's lots of different options. For example, Dusty, would you like to see the meme put in your Discord? I will go and hunt the meme you put in my Discord at in a few minutes. Admiral Paul, supposing HMS Victoria doesn't happen, and Admiral Tyrion possibly retires sooner after, how does the present affect RN officer cadre and naval conflicts in World War One? Oh, Trion A wouldn't retire. He'd be quite a big personal presence, but he'd be a massive encourager of the Selborne Fisher reforms and being massively obsessed and influential in that. In which case, they might actually get more success, be more successful, even than they were, and more involved. If you're going to have a ship AI built around the various animals, what about ships that take on the aspects of various dog breeds? No, because the HMS Poodle would be able to do backflips, open every space station and etc. You can possibly imagine, would eat itself quite happily and then suddenly decide it's not going to eat for a couple of days because it feels it needs to go on a bikini diet. Yeah, no thanks. Taking on dog breed personalities would not be good. And then we get the HMS Corgi, which would go around its entire time going, where are ankles? I must nip at ankles. I can't nip. Then I will destroy ankles. And I don't know why, because the dog, he doesn't do it to me. He doesn't do it to anyone in the family. But if he sees people outside the house, he's going, he either loves them, like Drac, or he wants to chase their ankles, like my aunt. I have told my aunt to stop wearing tassels, though. There's a Fox. If HMS Iron Duke having kept in good condition as a general training ship instead of the monster gunnery trainer she was, what would be done in run up to World War II? Up and end in World War II with her. There's not really many options. Honestly, the 13.5-inch gun is not enough of a gun for their job in World War II. It could work against something like Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, so maybe she'd be escorting convoys, but that'd be it. Andrew report, RN enters the depression with 20 modernish capital ships and leaves the depression with 30 odd modern capital ships. Everyone else, the jaws hanging. What just happened? The government decided to do their version of an employment scheme. This is the thing, you have to remember, British governments also go, we're laissez-faire, we do not support, we do not interfere in the economy, it's going to happen, we're going to be hands off. And then there's a recession, they launch the infrastructure program and a shipbuilding program. Every time there's an infrastructure program and a shipbuilding program. Yeah, we're not doing anything. We're just building a load of bridges, roads, and other things, and canals and ports and every other bit of infrastructure we can get our hands on. Public works, yes. You build a giant sewage system. That's amazing. It's nothing to do with recession. We are hands off, and oh, we're starting to build a whole load of warships. Really? Dr. C, the mic. What's happened to Mike? Oh, let's go check the mic. No, the mic's supposed to be right. Hello? Da-da. Sorry, your computer. Okay, that's good. That's bothering me. The UK gets 50 16-inch battleships from Ireland in 1929 for cheap. How are they used? Bye bye Italian Navy, bye bye German Navy. 50 16-inch battleships. That's if they're 50 battleships armed with 16-inch guns, and there are, let's say, they're decent size. Let's say they've got 6 to 9 guns each. There is probably not much of anything left of the German or Italian Navy. Because let's be honest, if you've got 50, you've got a massive preponderance of the battleships in the world. So you can afford to, after Toronto, sail half a dozen of them straight up to off the coast of Toronto and start blasting away. So it wouldn't be a case of we launched air attacks, we launched airstrikes, they're damaged, come into range, blast from the sea. 16-inch shells raining down into Toronto Harbour. Bye bye Italian Navy. Bye bye Italy in World War II, really, in that case, because if they don't have a navy that can support convoys, then and you can have 16-inch battleships wandering around, you can afford to disrupt the convoys something chronically. So that's North Africa campaign dealt with because they run out of supplies. Then you've got Norway. Well, in the nicest way, you're not if you've got 50 16-inch battleships, it's not going to be Hood and Prince of Wales which catch up with Bismarck. It's going to be Hood, maybe Prince of Wales, but hello, here are all my friends, another 4 of them with 16-inch guns. Oh, you're crying now. As basically Bismarck is going, Fetchkol! It's just that 50 16-inch gun battleships is just a huge preponderance of firepower. Huge preponderance of firepower. So, Nightingale, what British aircraft would have been better choice for COD and AW than HS-748? There are a few options out there, but none that really stick out to me. What if the Iron got their hands on the Saunders-Roe SR-177 jet rocket hybrid interceptor? The government doesn't mess it up. How do Iron carriers develop? It depends how useful it turns out to be. If it can go airborne, if it can actually maintain itself in the air for long enough, then it's useful as a cap. If it's just an interceptor that launches and then needs to be covered immediately, it's going to change the carrier design a little bit, but not much, because they probably won't want that many of them. Round Cash, good evening, class. Clarke, hope you're feeling like a candy class today. Always feel like a candy class. Steve Richards, hey Doc, what's your favorite British naval jet? The Sea Vixen. It's just cute. For example, let's see. Will you ever cover any cruises during the Cold War, including not USA, USSR? I will probably be getting into some cruises in Cold War. That's probably going to be on some of the videos I'm going to be looking at later in the year. Don Giovanni, the laissez-faire are cyclically Keynesian. Yeah, pretty much. Vintage Car History. Hello, VCH. How you doing? What are your 5 favorite authors, fiction or non-fiction, and what ship best describes each one? Oh, good lord. Well, non-fiction, it's got to be Andrew Lambert, Norman Freeman, Eric Grove, Harry Bennett. And number 5 is quite difficult because I have about 6 people in number 5 spot, but I'm going to go for Marcus Faulkner. And Marcus Faulkner would be an Atlanta-class cruiser, although he'll hate me for saying that. Andrew Lambert is HMS Warspite. Eric Grove was definitely Rodney, HMS Rodney. Norman Freeman. Norman Freeman is USS Essex. Essex, the aircraft carrier. That's him. Not Enterprise, Essex. And Harry Bennett. Ooh, what would I... Harry Bennett. The Age of Sail frigate, HMS Diamond. Not the modern destroyer. The Age of Sail frigate, Diamond. That would be him. Thank you, George Newman. No, Scott. The British government were well aware that when the poor have to decide between eating and heating, they tend to choose eat and burn the government to stay warm. Yes, and the British government had traditionally managed to avoid that by building all the things. They can't crew 50 battleships at that time. No, but they'd have a jolly good try. And let's be honest, if you've got 50 16-inch battleships, then in the nicest way, the R-class are bye-bye. And those crews are coming straight off. And there's probably other ships as well, which they would get the crews off. Georgian, can you imagine the USS Barb with the battle honors of the 2 Bruce Barbs? Where's my rocket launcher? It could be an interesting question to deal with. That's good. I think you need to say that the Bismarck would have been going, oh frigate. The Bismarck would have been going, oh mummy. Not even oh frigate. It would be, mummy. Excuse me, Mr. Hitler, I am only one ship. Have you seen how many of them there are? The Royal Router. How does HMS Glorious fare against the Twins if she's in a modernized light cruiser configuration? Not well. 90 carry run. With 50 16-inch armed battleships, Hood wouldn't be at the Denmark Strait. She would be could be spared and put in a modernization, more than likely. Let's see. Would also cover the Georgios Avaros from Greece, more than likely. Yeah. That's it. Will we be getting Bruships book or 2 to review on the cruisers? There will be some. There is going to be a Bruships cruiser book review, but I'm trying to get some new books on cruisers because you've seen most of my cruiser books already. Because there haven't been any good new ones that have come out, other than this one, which is of course not about, definitely not cruisers. They're just really, really general purpose destroyers, which is gorgeous. All of them. That one's good. That's a newer book. Hello, Hackenbergwell. Frank's let's see. Can you try and build the Russian island BB in about UAD? I will try and build a few things in UAD at some point. Let's see. Most thing I found exciting. Recording, and I'm re-recording again because I don't like the recordings I got so far of it. The Brahma class, and realizing that the light cruiser, which I have, well, which is in the Scarpa Flow, which is sitting there and pretty much intact, is actually one of them, and it is actually the Brahma itself. Is sitting in Scarpa Flow and is, in the bottom of the Scarpa Flow. It's in about roughly 30 to 40 meters down, and it's not really that far. Not that okay. Yes, you're going to need proper gear, but not that much. You're going to be okay, and usually it's fairly good water around it, and you can. It's a good thing to go and view. What are the possibilities for battlecruisers they're building in the mid to late 30s in terms of speed? Would a 40-knot capital ship be possible? Potentially. It's potentially. Probably they'd be going for 36 knots. You'd probably be looking at battleships looking at about 30 knots and battlecruisers around about 36 knots. Because once you try and get those last 4 knots up to 40 knots, it's going to cost you a lot of horsepower. Dr. Clarke, how would Vian have handled Atlanta-class cruiser? Every time he seems to be in command of a cruiser, he basically handles them like a large destroyer, and doesn't understand the concept of being too close. Naval, hello. Dr. Clarke, what would the daily life of an average rating on World War II destroyer be like, and is there a good book describing it? I like the Sea Vixen, but prefer the Buccaneer. There are a few good books. I have a book which is on the service on a Trouble-class destroyer, which is about its service as an average sailor. I'm trying to remember its name and where I've hidden it at the moment. Where have I put that book? There are a few good books. I will have to dig them all out. But if you want an example of one which is a good one for a very junior officer, Sub-Lieutenant by Ludovic Kennedy. That's excellent. But it was published in I think it was 1941. First published in 1942. And this is reprinted in November of 1942, so this is a November 1942 edition. Which is fairly good. Yeah, I have some very, very cool books. Some of them look very, very... Whenever people talk to me and they look at expensive books, if they don't know much about history books, they tend to go, oh, the flashy ones must be the most expensive, and no, it's actually usually the ones like this. I am very happy for how much I got this book for. Because my friendly bookshop guy sold it to me. And he was very, very kind. Very, very kind. And basically went, so I've priced it at this, because that's fine for me, and then I make a profit. And after you've bought it, you can tell me how much it's worth. So I bought it, and then I showed him. And he went, And then I showed him 3 other books which I hadn't bought and how much they were worth, and he adjusted their prices accordingly, and then felt that was fair. Rankash, strange question, but I often think when people say casement guns were wet and therefore ineffective as firing platforms, but surely they must have just rust and water prevention issues? They did have some issues, but often it depends on what type of sea you're in. Hello, Admiral BT. If you're in calm seas, they might well work. And remember, you have to remember, what are the casement guns for? And what level are they at? Are they for engaging other ships of equivalent firepower? Or are they as part of your protections against destroyers? In which case, you hope your destroyers are going to deal with the enemy torpedo boats first but the guns are therefore your backup measure to that. I read that Cutty-Sark was saved largely due to outrage of the sinking of the 74 gun ship HMS Blackable in 1949. I think that did have an impact, yes. If the ladder ship was saved, where could it have gone? Would it be saving Doom the Cutty-Sark? Probably not Doom the Cutty-Sark. Cutty-Sark could still well be saved. Implacable possibly would have been in Portsmouth next to Victory, or possibly, it depends how much money they want to put into moving it. Could be in Chatham. That'd be a good place to have it. Chatham would be a good place to have it. Rosa, I find your self-promotion both hilarious and endearing. Well, I'm trying. I want to be able to make sure I make it to Canada, so in the nicest way, I'm trying to do it the most honest ways I can. And that's basically some, by some self-promotion and some basically outright begging. But also a lot of hard work, hence I'm going off to do Justin Craig next weekend and a few other things, and I've got a lot of work going through and a lot of books, and I'm trying to produce enough videos as well, so for you all. Sturdy, lots of R's and lots of other words. Hello. Wow, some of these questions have some extremely imagination-loving group of people. But as well, thank you. That's very kind. I'm hoping you're a real person with that name, not a troll or something. But yeah, thank you. I can't pronounce your name. I do apologize. John Shea, currently playing Cold Waters, but aside from that, how scared would submarines in World War II be if the USA, UK, USSR, for the USSR only, have either one of the SN-14 or SN-15 16 USSR ASW missiles? If they have not just the weapon but the systems to actually fire them, then probably the 15-16 would be scarier, and they'd be very worried about them. Dr. C, how would you describe the difference between how to armor a battleship battlecruiser versus a carrier? Looking at a chart, Hexagon. Okay, well, if I'm armoring an aircraft carrier, I'm not bothering with the same level of armament a battlecruiser or even a battleship. But I probably do want some armor against its likely opponent. Its likely opponent is another aircraft carrier, which is air attack, which means I want deck armor. So I'm not looking for a massively thick belt. I'm not looking for a massively thick sort of those things. Probably looking for some torpedo defenses, and I'm looking for deck armor to stop bombs penetrating down in it, and bulkhead armor armored bulkheads to stop any explosion going off from rippling through the whole ship. So I'm probably looking for more bulkheads than I possibly have on a battlecruiser. I am a denser ship in that regards, but probably not as many as I have on a battleship, because she's not supposed to be blowing things up. Actually getting hit by things that blow her up. Karen, I picked up Jane's fighting ships for World War II in a remembered book sale for a couple of quid. I haven't yet read it. Is it any good? Yes. No, it's the time of Blizzard might have said Super Daisy. Timer wasn't here. Yep. Knights Agreement. Why were some of the high fleet just left in Scarborough instead of being salvaged? Because it was just considered too difficult. Oh, Derp Squad, why do you have to introduce poor people to the Blackburn that quickly? They had time to avoid getting their eyes tormented by that. Vintage Carlin Street. You have a magic ring that allows you to transport into any place at any time to slap a naval officer that this ring uses it. Whom do you slap and why? Can I only slap them, or can I say something to them as well? Because if I can just go back and slap them, then it might as well be just BT, just for the hell of it. But if I can say something to them, then probably Chatfield and the 14-inch guns of the King George V's. And the aircraft carriers. I probably slap them and go, "You idiot." and explain why in words of one syllable and less. This is Voxer. The Iron gets created and puts Polish crews on the tribals. Are they even more insane? Oh, good. That's worrying. The argument for that is, of course, Polish crews are very committed. The argument against it is that tribals are quite intense ships to crew, and you need very experienced destroyer crews for them. And the trouble is, a lot of the Polish crews were not as it didn't have a deeper pool of experience to draw from as the RN crews, which is why the ships they were given were the ships they were given were the ships they were given. They still did very well with them, and it learned very quickly. But, you know. Akinbavga, why does some naval personnel suffer from the misconception that their good oil level in a marine engine is to the top mark? During my week off, my ex-Navy colleague burned off a CA-50 oil mid-mark. There are lots of interesting personnel in this world. And people often forget that if you put the oil in the engine is going to expand with the heat as well. So if you fill it up to the top, it has less room to expand, which can put pressure on the engine. So usually you want it to give it a sort of expansion area, etc. And let's see, how much work would we need to modify the Admiral class to be 18-inch if the Renowns were 16-inch crew, because Dreadnoughts was 14-inch? Well, if Dreadnought was a 14-inch gun arm ship, then Orions would have been 16-inch, because they'd have jumped up. So they'd been 16-inch or 15-inch wouldn't have been enough. 15.5-inch would have been possibly enough, but they'd probably gone for 16-inch. Because once you're getting onto that size, you might as well go up to 16-inch. And if you're going up to 16-inch for Orions, then Queen Elizabeth's, they're 18-inch, which means the Renowns and our class are probably 18-inch, which means Admiral class, if they're going to be bigger, will be 18. It will be 20-inch, or probably would be 18-inch, like the Renowns and like the Queen Elizabeth's would have been, and the R class would have been. Or they'd have had treble 16-inch turrets. That would mean the thing. It would either been they'd have had to decide whether 18-inch, a double twin 18-inch was the best way to go, or a treble 16. And it might well have been the R class it might well have been the Queen Elizabeth would have had the 18s, the R's would have had treble 16s, and then they'd have gone, because that would have been considered cheaper than the 18s, and then the Hood would have had 18s, and the R's, Renowns would have had treble 16s. But they could have designed it for it, yes. But they'd have built it in from the design point. Thank you, Trinity. Let's see. Razor, what would the RN answer to the Drum Bearcat be? The answer to the Grum Bearcat is probably the what's it called? Hawker. What's it called? Is it Hawker? Yeah, Hawker Sea Fury. That's probably the RN's answer to the Grum Bearcat. If you look at it and think about it and think about the timelines. Oh gosh, Dr. Clarke, good. I always see your Toronto book on prominent display, but can never quite see the author, as I've never read a book on a subject. Can you enlighten me? It's David Hobbs. And it's one of the best books on the subject. I have to admit, someday I want to write a book on the topic, so I do sometimes feel like I should basically go, should I be recommending people look at this book? Yes, I do. Because it is a good book. And when it's the... mine will probably come out in... If I write the book on Toronto, I probably aim for the 90th anniversary, because there's currently plenty of books out on Toronto. But they mostly came out to do with the 80th anniversary 2 years ago. This one came out... what do you know? In 2020. 2 years ago. For the 80th anniversary. So probably 90th anniversary, I will hopefully have a book on Toronto out. And this one is David Hobbs. It's very good. It's very gorgeous. It's lovely. There's lots of good stuff in here. It's worthwhile reading. Ooh. When you read sci-fi, do you imprint real-world naval officers or fictional characters? Sometimes, especially when they've got the names of them. Yeah. Fast Carrier by Clarke C. Reynolds. It's a good one. They are good books. Those two I like, and I like using them when in conjunction with each other to usually wind people up and go, well, you have to compare both. And there's a few other new ones as well, which are quite good. Justin Craig. Yes, I work for Justin Craig Education. They're a A-level and GCSE revision company in the UK. And they do revision courses. And next week I am off being a course director, which is headmaster. Instead of my normal university teaching, I will be off being headmaster of a school. Basically, although my title's a course director, not headmaster. But as far as things make no difference, it's basically I'm in charge of ensuring staff responsibility, pastoral care, and all the centres run properly, and making sure all the various things work together and no one does anything bad. And everyone follows the rules and behaves and has fun, basically, and learns. That's good. The Blackburn is... Oh, Messiah. Oh, that's worrying. Thorns. Still got my Siemens manual when I joined, from when I joined the RN in 1975. Cool. Frank's.c is not selling out FCO product. No, I'll take that. And that's good. If HMS Carnival had been built in 1910, what would capital ships look by 1935? Oh my god. If Incomparable is built in 1910... then probably something like a Tillman battleship appears from the USN. Goodness knows what the Japanese built, but they probably have to build a whole new form of infrastructure to actually support it. Honestly, what they will look like will depend on the infrastructure constructed. If Britain builds an Incomparable and builds infrastructure around the world to support a level of something equivalent to an Incomparable, then you get an Incomparable level navy. And 1935 would be Incomparable plus, I don't know, 10, 15%, probably 20%. Considerous. On the question I asked earlier, some more candidates might be HMS Hood, Pre-Dread, and emailing those and Nanals. Harder would be Edward VII, Emperor of India. No, it would be. John Barrett, if you could be in any naval battle, which one would you choose? For me, definitely watch the attack on Pearl Harbor or maybe Swordfish in the Third Battle of Narvik. Swordfish at Third Battle of Narvik. Ooh, Swordfish in Third Battle of Narvik is good. Probably that one. For example, let's see, what loopholes would you have closed in various naval treaties? There's not really much point in closing loopholes because people just ignore them and go through them. If I was the Americans, I'd probably want to close the water armor loophole, but I'm not really sure I could get away with that because the British would probably drop out the treaty altogether. If I was being sensible, rather than closing a loophole, I would change certain things in terms of carrier design because I'd go, you need more carriers, and try and figure it out so they can get more and bigger carriers. But that's it. Not really closing a loophole. That's me allowing them. That, in nicest way, I would close the loophole on the carrier design by making it allow that they can be bigger and heavier, especially the conversion ones to help out the Saratogas. Excuse me a second. I'm going to leave you with Samuel Hood quickly to watch you while I go answer check on my door because someone's just knocked. Hello, what's up? Okay. Sorry, my sister needed a pot moved. I don't know. She's a lovely sister, but why she starts gardening at this time of night, I do not know at all. I do not know. Right. But guys, how much impact will the Japanese version of ME-262 have in the Pacific? Depends when it comes into service. If it comes into service early enough, they manage to build enough to provide some form of air defense for the home islands that could actually intercept, and how exactly is exact operating procedures. If it can't operate high enough to intercept the B-29s, then there's no point in it. But if it can operate high enough to intercept the B-29s, then yeah. If they can get into service, they could really change World War II's bombing campaign of Japan. Okay, she had to slap while screaming. Yeah, no, that's not really my style. I tend to. I don't really slap people anyway. I don't think I've ever done that. Given a few right hooks in my time, but that's only to people who've already been trying to hit me. Ruta, did the Royal Navy crew any of its ships with Indians, and if so, did they accommodate religious and cultural dietary requirements like vegetarianism and halal foods? There was various Royal Indian Navy vessels, some of them, and yeah, they did accommodate different requirements. The Royal Navy is usually quite honest about accommodating food. They don't mind that one. The Royal Navy learned that one early on. The Polish Navy in World War II gets all the Iron pre-dreadnoughts somehow, and somehow gets enough people to crew them. How do they fare in World War II? Get the pre-dreads get German-style refits. Ow. There's a heavy escort on most convoys, which probably means various things have accidents with them. It depends where they are and where they're deployed. It could cause things trouble for the Deutschland class, etc., but it's not really going to help much in World War II. Vintage car history. Back in my USN days, the snipes engineers on USS Henry B. Wilson would buy a case of Robinson PM and chug them for a buzz. That's interesting. Tanavaka, were the KGVs ever seriously handicapped by having 14-inch guns? Yes. Look, the 14-inch gun is a fine weapon, and if they'd had 12 in 3 quadruple turrets, the rate of fire would have been interesting. If they managed to have a full 16 in 4 quadruple turrets, and quadruple turrets had worked and everything was fine, then they would frankly have been the battleship version of machine guns. They would have been machine gun battleships. The amount of shells they could have fired at you would have been obsessive. But the trouble is 10 14-inch, to my mind, doesn't compensate for versus 9 16-inch. And its weight of fire, penetration, range, all sorts of things. And the thing is, the British had a 16-inch on the row, and they had it there going. So they introduced logistical issues and all sorts of things because of the 14-inch. And this is the other problem. If they'd gone with a 15-inch, that would have been perfectly acceptable, considering the logistical issues and the number of 15-inch guns the RN had in service. And the fact is, if you'd gone with an upgraded 15-inch gun, you would have probably ended up upgrading the Queen Elizabeth class, the R class, and every other 15-inch gunship in the Royal Navy very quickly to the new 15-inch gun standard, which would have helped the Royal Navy immensely. And I could understand that, but it's introducing another layer of logistics, another layer of complication, another layer of issues just for someone to say we're more peaceful because we have 14-inch guns rather than 16-inch or the 15-inch we normally have. Surely it's no. It's not the KGVs that are handicapped necessarily by the 14-inch guns, it's the RN as a whole. No, a twin 18-inch or triple 16-inch hood would have been on a frigate. Not only would hood render everything else, it was a revolution. It would be interesting. Ronakash, do you think if the Vickers had been doing an export 16-inch like their 14-inch, we would have actually made the step up from the honest 15-inch? Yeah. Polish crews in World War II were in large part from merchant marine that decided they are more useful than military vessels, aside from crews and officers of the Polish Navy that escaped to Britain. Yeah. The Dr. C version will be a long way away for the Toronto, as I said. It's be about another 6 or 7 years before I start writing it, probably. I'll have to make sure I've got at least 2 or 3 more books out before then, so that the lovely people at the publishers think I'm worthwhile investing for a Toronto book. Because the pictures for a Toronto book are going to be expensive. Not Richardson. The RN apparently intended to build a £30,000 aircraft for mortars. Any ideas on what this was aircraft be? See Mosquito on it, so it's not a £30,000 aircraft, an aircraft which would have a landing and takeoff weight of £30,000. So don't think of it as the aircraft weighing £30,000. Think of it as having an all-up weight when it's got all its munitions and everything on it of £30,000. and that's probably honestly not. That's probably what they are designing it to be up to. So they probably want it actually a margin. So probably looking at something 27,000 pounds. So it could be carrying a few 2,000 pound bombs. 6 of those would be another 12,000 pounds, or 3 or so torpedoes. That's another 6,000 pounds. That's 6,000 pounds. Right, gosh, wow, you do A level revision help. How do you keep things on track enough? I found A level very linear. Um, it's not on a new, and Costratus, it's not a new gig. I've been with Justin Craig for nearly 15 years. I've been a course director for 10 years. I've run centers for them. And yeah, I know it's one of those things, people find it strange, but when I'm teaching A levels, I teach A levels. When I teach university, I teach university. When I do YouTube, I do YouTube. And each has a slightly different style. And keeping YouTube linear, I've tried it in a couple of videos. It's never actually, it's going to sound strange. Some people do really like it, but it never gets as many hits or gets as many shares or gets as many discussions. And it doesn't get as much engagement from the viewers as my more university style, slightly discursive lecture style, which I sort of seminar style, which I adopt for the lives more often. And so that's what I go with. But I can teach A-levels. I have done it. I still do it. I do the headmaster role more often nowadays. I do the course director role more often, especially of things like their summer schools, etc. Because I enjoy it. I enjoy helping out the kids. I enjoy doing the pastoral care, but I also enjoy the tasks of running the center, coordinating the tutors, making sure everything works out well. It's nice. Rory said, let's see, I think you keep getting a Rapid Razorback's screen name conflated with mine. They're both alliterative names. I hope I'm not. I'm trying to read them out. Occasionally it gets a bit mush mush, as I call it, when a chat moves really quickly. Let's see. I know you have the calendar plans, but I recommend. Can I recommend Malta as a future holiday location? I think you would like Museum Valletta. I know I would. The wonderful Kate Jameson has been there and sent me pictures, and I have been very, very jealous. It's like it's just it's a case of I've got to keep working, and I was having a bit of a crisis the other day. I have to admit, and chatting away to myself, thinking, okay, can I keep this going? And then I looked at the YouTube stuff, I looked at the book stuff, and I thought, well, yes, I can. I'd be in a crisis if I had a wife and kids to support at the moment, but I don't. I just have myself, so I have a little bit more time to get things stable. I don't even have a girlfriend at the moment, so yeah, I just have me to look after, my dogs, and my mum and sister. Well, all fairly self-sufficient, barring the poodle. The corgi is far more self-sufficient than the poodle. I love the poodle, but the corgi will not. The corgi will go find someone else rather than decide you cannot go to the loo alone. The poodle will try and sit on your lap when you're going to the loo, which is probably far too much information for everyone. But sorry. Yeah, certainly. The main problem that Japan would have had was lack of experienced pilots by late World War II. Yeah, the Japanese pilot training program did not work as well as they'd hoped it would. Because they developed it in the China scenario, which had been very different. They've been able to recover pilots far easier than the Pacific War. You can't recover pilots as easily from the middle of the ocean. So you almost have to take the thing of, we have to take them home to start training. I think you may have started a cult accidentally. Please don't bring that up. I keep getting worried I'm going to get the Vatican after me or something. Thank you, VCH. John Murray, most unusual family placement on Navy. Oh, I've got so many weird family positions in Navy. I had one family member who reportedly, when he was first on the ship, was on board the ship as the Bish, as the vicar on the ship, and but ends up somehow coming back as the commanding officer because there's no one else left. But that's a very interesting family story about a very small ship, and I don't, in my experience, small ships that size don't have a Bish, especially not in the Age of Sail. But so there's also another discussion which he may have actually taken out the last surviving officer because he was an idiot, but we're not quite sure about that one. There's some very, that's a very colourful member of the family, which if eventually I do a video about them, will involve me having to get the permission of several of the aunts because they have his records. But yeah, some of my family were really not that far away from. We'll go with they were very much privateers. Very, very much privateers. There's a fox. In the 1920s, Malta drifts itself into a position the same to that of Gibraltar, with a cultural and identity shift towards being different from British. How does it affect decolonization in the RN? Honestly, if there were several debates at various points about whether or not Malta should join Britain, like Gibraltar, and there is. It does spin on a coin a couple of times, so it might have ended up being in a Gibraltar-like scenario in a British overseas territory. For example, let's see, what might be an important lesson the RN used in World War II that they learned specifically from the 1800s? Health of crew. They were still trying to, they was at one point in World War II, they were hunting lime juice to make sure they could keep their crews healthy. Do you know what other modifications would you fit to the Queen Elizabeth class battleships if you had time before World War II? I'd love to give them all engine upgrades. If I could. If I had time and I could get the money and no one was going to argue me doing it, I would upgrade all their engines. Try and get them up to 28 knots. I'd have them all be given a sort of Warspite style upgrade and refit, but with engine upgrades included in it. If I go to, do you think the US did the right thing by retaking the Philippines instead of invading Taiwan? Strategically, considering what we know now, no, maybe not. But politically, for the time, probably. Professor, Dr. Clarke, I'm going to have to start listening to you while writing book reviews. This one went very smoothly. I'm glad. That's good. It's just trying to keep you safe while distracted. Potentially. Tim Richards, the Fairy Gannet because it's got the best name engines, the double Mamba. Does sound like you're about to dance something in a strange position. Anna, did the family actually have letters of marque? Yes. So anyway, was health crew a problem in other navies? Not really. Most of them had learned the experience of the 1800s. Why did torpedoes go out of favour as anti-ship weapons? If the Falklands went hot today, would the Irons still need to raid Royal 2 stocks for effective torpedoes? No, the current torpedoes are fairly effective. And they didn't raid World War II stocks. They were carrying them because they were worried about the effectiveness of the torpedoes they had. But it's a sort of interesting question. Torpedoes haven't gone out of favour in terms of submarine as anti-ship weapons. They're still very much in favour. For surface ships, they just haven't got the range of missiles. If you get into torpedo range on a surface ship, then frankly, Surely the missiles will have engaged you a long time before then. That's what I have to see. When was the last Iron Ship mutiny? Iron Mutiny? Any close to World War II? Invergordon is the last major mutiny prior to World War II. There were a few, what would be called situations, discussions, and incidents. But by and whole and by and large, they were handled far more professionally and better than Invergordon, because especially the officers, the good officers who had the respect for their crews, were managed to get at the heads to mostly look after them. Benjamin, by the time you read this, I'll be back to work. I'm very busy at hotel. Hockey, kids, and parents. Fun times. Enjoy. In Tanefelica, they developed a technique called the press circling bombing to chuck nuclear weapons at Sverdl behind a sort of cruisers and be going in the opposite direction when they went off. Yeah. But they also used that, were planning on using that for all sorts of other weapons to attack Sverdl-class cruisers. But basically, nuclear weapons were the final option. They preferred other weapons to take out the Sverdls first. The RN had no desire to start kicking off nuclear phase of World War III. Do you think the navies of the world have gotten out of balance when it comes to numbers of destroyers and frigates? I think they've got out of balance when it comes to the number of surface escorts completely. I think they've got out of balance in terms of comes to number of ships. I think we got far too much of a policy of wars based on choice. If you consider currently now, if F-35 procurement had been on schedule as it was supposed to be for the UK, and if the Sea Harrier the Harriers had not been retired in 2010, like they weren't originally planned to be, the odds are Britain would have, and if we had actually got 3 Queen Elizabeth class carriers rather than 2, the odds are, as we speak, there will be a worked up carrier battle group, and especially if we've got 9 Type 45s and the full 18 Type 23s, in service and all that sort of thing. There would probably the odds are, and enough astute, there would be a fully worked up British carrier battle group currently sitting in the Barents Sea, probably with an American carrier battle group. They would be doing a lovely NATO exercise. They would have all sorts of aircraft aboard. The British one would probably be a squadron of F-35s and a squadron of Harriers, because they wouldn't have the full F-35s in yet, but they probably have a mixture of the two, and you could accommodate a Harrier. The space is designed for an F-35, you can accommodate a Harrier. It's smaller. And they'll be sitting up there as a reminder that the world has spread. And it's a case of, if you deploy to things like Ukraine, you look offensive, you look aggressive. But if you're just taking part in an exercise off the coast of Norway, then America then people can say you're being aggressive, but your honesty, you've got plausible deniability. The fact you're now within a very good position to move into strike range is neither here nor there. But you can't do that because we haven't got enough ships, because we went for the idea of we'll always be able to choose when we go to war. Nice. 2018 was the Harrier 2 out of service date. I have a feeling that would have been extended. They would have probably been in service till about 2024, probably. Especially with the F-35s and, if you had a third carrier coming in. Stephen Richards, did I hear right? Did Drax say that the triple 15-inch weighed less than the quad 14-inch for the King George V? I haven't seen. I have heard something said like that by someone else. I haven't heard where he said that, but I have heard someone said that before. So I think yes, they would have done. Where is it? How would you modify the USN and RN composition to rebalance the high-end, low-end composition? Oh, there are so many different ways. Honestly, it's far too complicated to get into here, but it would probably be something for build prompts to discuss. Were there any strictly sail ironclads? Not to my memory. There were a few which were very sail dependent and barely used their steam engines, but most of the ironclads, once they're ocean-going ironclads, have steam engines in them, so they have them as well. I've answered the mutiny question, I think. Let's see, meme. Yes, meme. Let's go find the meme. Diddle. If I open Discord on the computer, that will cause an issue. But if I open it on my phone and share it from there, let me just open it. Save image and random. Let's put it into the OneDrive. Sorry, having to mentally remember how I'm doing these things. Move to... and put it into the desktop. Let's see if it's popped up on the desktop. Yep, it has. So this is the meme that apparently started tonight's discussion of cruisers, which I find slightly worrying, but we'll leave to one side. And I presume it's very cyclically ship designs. I'm not sure I put a Type 45 as true neutral. That seems a bit strange. Lawful Good seems to be a British lifeboat, and then there's Turbina. There's the Glomar Explorer as Chaotic Good. Lawful Neutral is an Iowa-class battleship? I have no idea what Lawful Evil is. I'm looking at it and trying to figure out from that hull shape, but no idea. Chaotic Neutral looks Japanese to me, but I could be wrong. Neutral Evil, we all know them, Pegasuses. And Chaotic Evil, well, that's the Soviet Union's greatest production. So, Nick, how worried are you about the current situation? Worried enough. Then, what's the range of an F-35B when launched from a meaningful payload? Depends what you define as meaningful and what role it's doing, because there's a meaningful payload for the air defense role, there's a meaningful payload for the strike role. They're different. And look, we keep forgetting the enemy adversary has a vote when and where we go to war. Yep. What military preparations can be made with a month to prepare for major military action? Training for 3 weeks. Basically, blast everything through as much training and as much fire control training, especially. Especially want to improve gunnery, and then stand everything down and do maintenance for a week and make sure everything's working before anything happens. Let's see. What are some major cultural impressions that the Japanese picked up from the UK? Speed. I love it. Operator, what could Poland or Russia have done with 2 weeks advance warning of the German invasion? Mobilized reserves, and probably in the case of the Polish, managed to come up with some very sneaky traps, a lot of explosives and a lot of infrastructure, and probably would have quietly kept a watch on all the groups of individuals who were, let's say, going to be a fifth column. That's right. What's accidents have been said to change the Royal Navy? Every accident has an effect on the Royal Navy. It depends on how big an accident. Basically, I would say the biggest one, which I've covered and I've put in my book, was about the T-class boat, which sunk. And when the submarine went down, that caused the Royal Navy to do a very big study on it. Speaking of Harris, I always wondered if in the hunt for Red October, back when the US uses RN uses the 2-seat training version for ASW catching a US sub in Exodus, was it possible? Not really. Budgate, do you think the US would have been better off if the US didn't pick the F-21 Super Tomcat over the F-18 Hornet? I do, but that's partially because I love the Super Tomcat. It would have been more expensive, though. Andrew McCollum, KGV 4-gun turret weighed 1,582 tons. Gareth Dawson, yes, Lawful Evil is HMS Polyphemus in Malta Dry Dock. Nice, Karen. It's perfectly reasonable that the RN. Yes, it was a fetus, which was a T-boat incident. Joe Scott, hygiene maneuvers is going to make it all more likely that the Buccaneer only suffered one fatal incident while in service is a very good safety record for military aircraft. Yep. Poland did all that. Reserves were called up for training earlier. It was obvious war was coming. Did anyone do any books or papers on the lost relearning of RN carrier culture? Not yet. I'm sure they will do once they've had enough time. I'm hoping Vice Admiral Kidd does one. I would like to see Jerry Kidd's book if he's allowed to publish it. The Royal Research. I don't think anyone would be foolish enough to start another great power war. Nuclear powers will use nuclear weapons in all that conflict. The Royal Research. We will always hope so, but the trouble is, no one ever sets out to start a great power war. They all think they can avoid it. They all think they're smart enough to get what they want without that consequence happening. That's the trouble. People always believe they're smart enough to avoid the consequences everyone else is going to fall into. Next one, let's see. In UAD, where would you say that dry dock is in the world? I have no idea. It looks, to me, it does look British in styling, but I'm not quite sure where it is. Looks sort of like a bit like Camel Laird's, but it could also be parts of Portsmouth and Plymouth. In the British one, the Frenchish one is a bit different. So, let's talk about this book. Falcon's Victory. Now, why is this a cool book? Because it's brand new. It was published in 2022. It's got all sorts of color plates in it. It's got a timeline for John Falcon's career. He joined the Navy in 1685. He took part in the Battle of the Lizard in 1707. He was part of the various other things during that time. Command of the Gloucester, 60 guns in 1709. Transferred to the Colchester, 54 guns in 1710. Took command of HMS Diamond, 42 guns in the West Indies in 1715. Then commanded the Oxford, 70 guns in Nor in 1717. Then Shrewsbury, 80 guns in the Mediterranean in 1718. Took part in the Battle of Cape Passaro. Command of Monmouth in 70 guns in the Baltic in 1719. Command of the Ipswich, 70 guns at Spithead. 1726, command of Monmouth again, cruising in the Baltic. Promoted to Rear Admiral in 1729. Promoted to Vice Admiral in 1734. Promoted flagship Princess Amelia, 80 guns in 1735. Flagship was the Russell, 80 guns in 1739 to 40. Then promoted Admiral of the White Squadron, flagship Princess Amelia in 1743. Retired, knighted, and appointed governor of Greenwich Hospital. 1744, recalled as Admiral on flagship Victory, 110 guns, lost and drowned in storm. So, a very experienced officer. He had served pretty much from 1685 to 1744 almost continuously, so let's be honest, that is 59 years of service. HMS Victory, the one he went down on, well, her career starts in 1673 when she is ordered as a 100-gun first-rate warship. She's built as the Royal James. In 1690, renamed Victory, after old 1666 built second-rate Victory, condemned. Flagship of Sir John Aspey at the Battle of Barfleur in 1692. Rebuilt at Chatham Dockyard in 1694-5. Vice Admiral Matthew Almer complains Victory's instability in 1697. Victory was decommissioned in 1705. In 1714, given a new commission and renamed Royal George. 1715, again renamed Victory. 1721, caught fire while beaming in Portsmouth Harbour. 1721, then same year, taken to pieces and stored in Portsmouth Harbour, so she was completely dismantled. In 1726, Victory ordered to be rebuilt as a 100-gun first rate. So they've basically taken the pieces, stored her in a warehouse, and now they're rebuilding her again. Now, I wonder where the new pieces are coming from. Oh, I mean, no, not. Of course, they're not new pieces. They're coming from the warehouse, aren't they? It's the same pieces. In 1727, her new keel was laid at Portsmouth Dry Dock, and officially ordered to be rebuilt in 1733. But she'd already had her keel laid in 27 and been ordered as rebuilt as a 100-gun first rate in 26. So, been under construction for about 7 years by that point, by the time she's officially ordered rebuilt. She's launched and commissioned in 1737, so that's 11 years later. She was the flagship of Admiral Sir John Norris in the Channel Fleet in 1740. Collided with Lion and damaged her off Portland in 1740. Then was the flagship of Admiral Sir John Belkin, commanding the Anglo-Dutch fleet to Lisbon in 1744. On return, is lost with all hands in a fierce storm in English Channel. In 2008, the wreck of the Victory found around 80 kilometers southeast of Plymouth, 75 meters deep. In 2019, Victory's 42-pounder bronze gun displayed in the National Museum of the Royal Navy. This is a wonderful book. And I'm going to read a section of the introduction for you. The British press, especially the London newspapers and journals, were keen followers of all things naval at the time. So when the battered ships of Balkan's squadron began to arrive in Plymouth, Portsmouth, and Spithead in the days following the storm, the press expressed growing anguish and anxiety about the absence of victory. When the wreckage was found and confirmed to be that of victory, the consternation turned up to outpourings of grief and lamentation, including songs, poetry, and plays. That was followed by paintings, etchings, and other manifestations of widespread shock over the loss amongst the populace of the nation at large. Examining this material clearly demonstrates why the tragedy event itself came to dominate and even overshadow the histories of Balkan and victory, even to the extent that they have become known only for a shipwreck. By identifying the recorded achievements and individual legacies of the admiral and his ship, we can bring them out of the shadows of the shipwreck that took them away. Finally, examination of the checkered life of the ship itself, from her origins through rebuilding, service activities, and incidents, from her birth in 1673 through to her sinking in 1744, reveals a fresh view of contemporary ship design, shipbuilding, and dockyard administration. This in turn helps link the loss of victory to subsequent widespread reforms in dockyard practices and ship design, giving us a much better understanding of the significance of victory's newly restored guns and what they represent. The same approach is taken to establish the importance or significance of Balkan himself, and to identify his achievements that should have been made more recognizable, if not heroic. A detailed examination of Balkan's life, firstly in the context of birthplace, Godalming in Surrey, not far from me, his family life, and early records of his career, leads us to analyze those aspects of life that can now be reconsidered in order to demonstrate the importance of his achievements and legacy. If Balkan was, in the opposite opinion of Daniel Bow in his latest biographical essay on the admiral, only best known to history by a shipwreck, then the discovery and display of the guns call for a greater understanding of the wider significance of his life and legacy beyond his shipwreck. Balkan's part in questioning ship design and maintenance, his relationship with crew and officers, and his undoubted courage revealed through the minutes of his 2 courts-martial, as well as his actions in battle, all combine to confirm that he was much more than a run-of-the-mill naval officer whose place in naval history should rise above the ordinary and emerge above the story of a shipwreck. I am not reading anything more from this book because it is such a beautiful book to read. It is beautifully written, it is beautifully put together, it has gorgeous photos in it. And if you are interested in an Age of Sail book, which is not your usual officers and not your usual HMS Victory, this is definitely a book for you to go and have a look at. It's really cool. This book is Balkan's Victory. And I will put a link to it down in the bit below. I'll get it up now. It's real history. It's not alternate history, it's real history. Bam, bam. Definition looks good from that list, but let's go to I've got that one. I got that one coming to me. There we go. And it's a cool book. It is well worth reading, and it's a lot of fun. Mm. Andrew, come on, come on. I cannot find turret weights for various earlier KGB designs. The weight of turn armor on proposed 15-inch exceeded the production version with 14-inch. Yeah, but you must remember the 14-inch they compromised by doing a double, doing two quads and a twin. Whereas I think the treble 15s, they were looking at 3 treble 15s. So yeah, they'd have been heavier than one and possibly lighter than the other two. And it depends how much heavier the treble 15 is versus the double 14. And also, then you've got the ammunition and the ammunition weights, and the individual shells are going to be heavy. Let's put it this way: it probably works out as much of muchness. There's probably not much different in it, but the KGBs were quite tight designs. Hey, Cascadian. Hope you're having a good day as well. Hello, Malay 1640. Don't worry, you deserve a rest. You've had a tough week, and you keep sending me cool cat videos, so you're allowed to be late. Jonathan Barr, was there ever a battleship Pontefract in any fashion? I honestly have no idea. I can't remember one, but that doesn't mean there wasn't one. There's a lot of battleships out there with some weird names. This is Voxo. What would the effect of an integrated Malta in the Cold War of an integrated Malta decolonization? Would it be controversial as Gibraltar post British Empire? Probably not. And Gibraltar really isn't. One of the interesting things about Gibraltar is it's not really controversial in the UK. It's controversial in Spain, but not in the UK. In the UK, it's kind of like the Falklands. It's a case of what the public want to be. They want to be part of Britain. Okay, then that's what it be. Naval, what ship type would you add to the present day RN, and in what numbers? And how would you justify these additions by government of the day? I wouldn't really add any ship types. I'd be tempted to add a cruiser level, but we'll leave that to one side. I'd just like to have more of the ones we actually already have. Is the British Empire stayed together in Cold War? Does China have a border with India? Possibly. They've been having an on and off tussle over the border for a while now. I guess it's 9 o'clock. The lighting on the video on the things have just changed. Let me just adjust my eyes. I don't know. I wonder why it's got brighter now. Usually it goes darker when it's later at night. But again, were there any first or second rate ironclads? They didn't really last around long enough to get to first and second rate ironclads. They moved into a sort of different world quite quickly. They were de facto first or second rate ironclads, but they weren't really called first or second rate ironclads. Read the Battle Cruise in New Zealand recently. The end made me wonder what the relationship between Beatty and Jellicoe was like. Collegial, adversary, open mutual loathing? I think it was publicly at least collegial, because Beatty insisted on being one of the pallbearers for Jellicoe. But that what might have been his obsession with image. It seems the other books he was planning on reviewing today are still in transit. Yes, there were total of. I had basically 5 books like this planned for today, and they were all supposed to arrive over the last couple of days, and they haven't. And combined with, since they're supposed to arrive Thursday, Friday, and that would give me time to read them, and combined with some other things which have cropped up and some other meetings, and surprisingly enough, people wanting me to sit in on certain meetings and discuss things. I haven't managed to get other books ready for it. So I thought, well, I'll do a Q&A and I'll do discussion of a couple of books and I'll do some comment answers. And I'll also do what I'm about to do next, which is talk through the patron vote and the patron topic suggestions. So, topic suggestions we've had so far. I will first get through to the end of the bottom of the comments and then I'll get on to topic suggestions, actually. Most of it, I hadn't realised there was another victory. There had been another victory. There have been several HMS victories. For example, let's see, who was responsible for ship names in 1800s? The Royal Navy Ship Naming Committee, the same as today. The composition of the committee changes, but there's still a committee. There's always a committee. Reprozak, I got to thinking about UAV and carriers the other day, and I know you and Drac are fans of the idea. They aren't stealthy, but I wonder how many predators you could operate off a QE or a Ford. Yes and no. It's the trouble is it's actually operating them off. Honestly, you could probably actually more easily operate them off a QE, but than a Ford. But you would try to operate them off a Ford because honestly, you wouldn't want to use a Predator with a catapult. You wouldn't. That would just break the air. That would shatter the airframe. Landing on a carrier would be bad enough for them. In the last UAD video, the full forward AB triple 15-inch battlecruiser design, albeit she was a tight design and handled well in the sim, comment, I felt bad with on a few stern 6-inch turrets. Well, that's because I was keeping it to renowned style where they didn't have the 6-inch turrets. I have a feeling any upgrade in the interwar year would have included 6-inch triples. Don't want to stick to. The thanks what does see. Got one gun officers had pocket calculators. How much faster would they make hits? Well, it depends. Some people are very good at mental arithmetic. Some people aren't. It's not so much a pocket calculator you need as an Excel spreadsheet. Juicy, India China is a very risky border situation. The US side has any intentions of recognizing each other's claims. Exactly. Run. Why was the Buccaneer S1 crashed on December 1st and December 8th, 1970, the final straw for the Royal cause? Not really. The RM was trying to move to the S2 anyway, so the S1 it just accelerated things. There's also, at least in Hong Kong was permanent and not handed back to China, but everything else is the same. As affected bringing China war. But there would have to be a very hefty garrison in Hong Kong as we speak. And probably the British would have to be reinforcing it somehow. That's what we're doing. Operating what aircraft off a carrier? Predator drones, etc. Operate them off an aircraft carrier. There are a lot of we are a very big fan of UAVs, but the UAVs, if you're going to operate them off an aircraft carrier, you need to make sure they're actually capable of operating off an aircraft carrier. Well, I think Manny 640, as Carl Gasway has pointed out, with practice, slide rulers are better than pocket calculators. However, having a pocket calculator CPU built into your central fire control table improves things greatly, and I think that's where it comes in. It would come in handy. Hello, Brandon Larson. Treble 15, double treble 15 versus Renown. Renown had an aft turret. That makes heavier secondaries disposable. With an aft turret, the thing is, they didn't really design them with heavy secondaries. And honestly, you're, again, as I tried to point out in the scenario we're talking about, if I was designing a battleship, the rear gun is always going to be there in my mind because I think it's better. But it's going to, if I'm designing a battle cruiser, which is all about maneuverability and speed and range and endurance and all those things for its duties, whilst having hitting power. Having a scenario where I can have all the guns forward and all the big magazines forwards, and then I can have a section between it for hull stuff from coming down from the superstructure, and then I have the engines, and then I have all the heat generating stuff, so I can keep the magazines and the heat and the engines separated enough so that the heat from the engines does not affect the magazines and therefore doesn't affect the shells and the powder and all the ammunition, etc. Then that makes for a very efficient ship design, and I can concentrate my armor over a certain amount of space, so I can achieve a far greater horsepower density. And the battle cruiser, the whole point is it has the speed and space in the ocean to maneuver to always make sure its guns can bear. If you're talking about a battleship and you're talking about fighting in maybe the Mediterranean or to an extent the North Sea, but less so, if you're talking about fighting in especially in the Adriatic, or if you're talking about fighting in the Baltic, or you're talking about fighting in the Black Sea, you want the battleship, you want the ability to have the gun on the other side, because you might not get to turn around in time. And that's the other thing with a battleship. Its speed is that much lower that it cannot dictate the range. It usually isn't a battleship or a muchness. Senator, is there an Armchair Admirals tomorrow? I don't think there is tomorrow. There was last week. And as you also saw in that thing, the 4-inch guns were very effective the treble 4-inch guns were very effective for their time. We all know what happens, and you realise in the war period, definitely the 6-inch gun upgrade is needed. But for their time, if you're talking about it, anything that's really a threat to them is mostly a vessel with torpedoes, which is a light cruiser or destroyer. Those treble 4-inches are going to massacre them. Professor, given the issues with the German surface fleet during World War II, would they have been better served by an E-boat swarms than conventional surface ships, not good against convoys, but better against warships? You see, the problem is whenever people come to me with this idea, I sit there and go, on paper, you're saying yes, but that's as long as the Royal Navy stays the same. If you go for a one-dimensional threat, or even a two-dimensional threat, rather than a 3 or 4-dimensional threat, then the Royal Navy can focus its resources that much better. If you are talking about having E-boat swarms, then the Royal Navy will be upgrading its C-class vessels with 4.5-inch turrets, or whatever else they can get their hands on, rapid-firing 4-inch, 4.5s, 4.7-inch, whatever, to make sure they can put out a sheer volume of shells to take out those E-boats. And it doesn't take a big hit to take out an E-boat. This is the thing. The tribals found their 4-inch guns, their rapid-firing 4-inch AA guns, if they modified them, were perfectly adequately for smashing up E-boats. So you would just churn those out as escorts. And that is the problem. If you make life too easy for the RN, you make it more difficult for yourself. So yes, you can sit there and go, on paper, compared to the RN as it existed in 1940, if we'd focused in on this or focused in on that, we would have had a far stronger Navy. But the reality is, the RN of 1940 wouldn't have been the RN of 1940 if its threat had been more one dimension, had been less multi-dimensional, or had less dimensions to it. There's a box set. Malta, Singapore, and Hong Kong get more heavily anglicized and become overseas territories. How does this affect transmission between Pax Britannia and Pax Americana, given the RN world basing? It probably smooths it in some respects, but it also makes it more interesting in others. To be honest, it would probably mean that America would have to accept Britain being slightly stronger than it currently is it was historically in the 1950s, but it would also explain the British government would have to be slightly different than it was. It also depends what type of overseas territories they are. If they're just overseas territories, they're overseas territories. If they're self-governing overseas territories, but they depend on Britain for their foreign policy and their armed forces, then Britain will have to step up with their own foreign policy and armed forces. And that will change the personnel numbers, and that will change the composition of aircraft. You would probably find each of those areas would have to have a squadron or so of Eurofighters procured for them. And then if you have that as your standard, then perhaps the Falklands has a squadron of Eurofighters rather than just a flight. It becomes an interesting one, basically. If a Flower-class corvette could roll on wet glass, they were slightly more stable than that, but not much. What warship would remain stable in North Atlantic storm? Big and heavy. Basically, in a storm, if you want to be bigger enough and heavy enough that its energy is not going to knock you as much. So anyway, was there ever a case where the ship got loaded with the wrong ammo? Not really. As I showed in the M33 video, they had various things to sort of solve that issue. Also, yeah, read Predator on CV. That'd be like trying to land an F-15 or Eurofighter Typhoon on carrier. I'd want to have some high-speed camera filming from multiple angles. That's just because you like you like explosions. Coming out of churning out E-boats. In Britain, during churning out Western World and Bowfighters or anything with four-nose mounted 20mm cannon. And their own boats as well. Frank Sonder, could you make a battleship shell that shoots a bunch of 20mm or 40mm? No, but you could probably make one that would pelt out lots of pellets of molten copper. Nice. Did the UK have any aircraft designs comparable to the US F-14? Not really, but that's because the British weren't really looking at it for that one. So, let's go through the questions from Patreon. And because I am a bit of a sod, I always copy and paste these out onto Microsoft Word. And as I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the questions. And then I'm going to... There you go. There are the questions. Then I'm going to basically talk you through how I'm going to change them when they're going into... Well, I'm not changing them, but there are limits to A, the length, and B, sometimes I modify them a little bit before they go into the questions, because then they become more questions that I can answer. Calm Guys Vote. The fastest cruiser on the planet on the 15th of November 1910, also the first light art scout armor cruiser, the SMS Admiral Spawn and his half-sisters SMS Cider, Helgoland, and Novara. So I'm presuming this for life would be how useful were, would be how I put it. When watching the vid, I kept expecting the doc to make a Heidi High pun. Wish you had the fun when you get to a ship. Suggest the UCN Halcyon class light cruiser. USNC Halcyon class light cruiser. That could actually be a fun thing to look at. I would want to be. I keep trying to track down the decent books on their ship design for the USNC, and I haven't managed to get hold of a decent book yet on it. This is my problem. This is why I haven't done anything really on the USNC. Cody, Dr. Clarke designed Star Wars fleet. That could be fun. Daniel Freeman. Well, for starters, Daniel, you very kindly offered and suggested many ways of how we should get to the both Haida and to Vampire. I will just say that me, Jamie, and Rack have considered them carefully and are working out what we can do. Back to the lecture, seminal topics. What everyone does aboard ship in different eras. Age of sail, age of coal, age of oil. In battle in more normal sailing conditions. Pre-war adventures of the tribal class. I'm presuming these are as in several questions. So I will be working out which ones I'll be going with. That's actually quite a cool load of questions and to discuss and to consider. And same questions of the tribal class, captain, PC, petty officer, CPO engineers, except for cruisers. That's all kind of interesting. I would need to figure out examples to go through that, but I might put that. I would have to say I'd be tempted to combine a couple of those into one, because I think you would need to contrast where the experiences come from and how the experiences come in. So I might, when you see the question that will come from that in the Patreon vote, it will probably be a combined question. Okay. In car. Varying fortunes of two sets of sisters. Renown, repulse, their rebuilds, and varying usefulness. How does contribute to loss of the latter? Nelson Rodney. Why was Rodney so much busier during World War II and worn out by war's end? That's a cool question, Ian, and I'm definitely going to be putting that in pretty much as is. But it might get shorter down to varying fortunes of two sets of sisters. Renown, repulse, and Nelson Rodney, because that will fit in the actual box, which they allow you to put the question citizens in for Patreon for people to vote on. Northern Barrage, was it really the least profitable voluntary major undertaking of the war? Interesting. Richard Osawa, the US finds out about Pearl Harbor sneak attack on November 30th, 1941. What do they do to defend it? Ooh. Bichon, Nelson's, Strasbourg's, Tones and battles. What is concentrating the entire main? When is concentrating the entire main armament forward a good and not so good idea? That could be a lot of fun to get into a discussion, especially considering the question response we've had and the question from Carver Gasway earlier and the discussion of that one. Selma Busher scheme: the integration and de-integration of the executive and engineering branches of the Royal Navy, 1900 to 1925. Bichon, the design and career history of the Douglas A-1 Skyrounder, the US Navy's piston-powered torpedo dive bomber of the jet age. The Battle of the Thames, Imperial Grand Admiral Thrawn tries for London. Jack Ray, I would like to learn more about the US Coast Guard missions. I'm not sure what would be a good time period to go. I used to know the stories that impact general effect of the missions. I'd be tempted to put that as a question called the US's Second Navy and what they get up to. But those are the topics and questions, and broadly speaking, there will be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 topics to pick from. Questions to vote on. So when I go finish the night's live in about 10 minutes, they will be going up. And you will hopefully be and hopefully the votes will come in and people will enjoy them. As a fox, is there an Atlantic version of a Typhoon? If so, if there were, how terrifying would it be for the escort and carrier? Not really. There is hurricanes and various and storms and all sorts of things, and we don't tend to call them typhoons in the Atlantic, but they're quite powerful. They're scary, horror, terrifying for the escort and carry. Usually, what they do is they try and get out of to keep out of the way of it. That's why you have all the weather team, etc., and the meteorological team on carriers and in fleets to try and keep your ships away from those things. Doctor 95, do you think we in the UK are too reliant on foreign designs and manufacturing, like Boxer, for instance? Isn't it better we make our own APC rather than buy someone else's? Doctor 95, it would be lovely to make our own, but the trouble is that would cost a lot of money, and by the time we spent, but we actually. Let's be honest, Boxer, we were involved in the conception of first. It was technically a joint program like Eurofighter. We pulled out of it, then we went back into it, then we pulled out of it, and then we're back in it again. We've got the CV90, which we own the designs for, but we went with Ajax, which is absolutely custom build terrible. Honestly, I would love to say yes, but considering what we've produced so far on our terms of our actual own designs, when we've been in charge of it, we can produce some very good designs, but it seems to be once our Ministry of Defence gets involved, we have trouble with that. And we get a lot of things which are built for, not with. So I would say no. I'd like us to try and concentrate on building our own tank, because I think we could make a better tank for ourselves than we could with importing others. But we'll probably end up importing American tank or doing a joint Anglo-American tank program to replace the Abrahams and the Chieftain, Challenger. Westwood, Austro-Hungarian rapid cruisers. Their appearance impact on global destroyer design, cruiser design. Their strong and weak points and immediate reaction will impact Model 1. Yeah. Aaron, US learns of Pearl Harbor attack early. First off, fuel and ammo arm all the aircraft and not let the pilots go on leave. Next, have all the ship's hold boilers online. Instant residue get away. Let's be honest, you get the ships. If you learn the enemy are coming in, you get the ships out to sea. You learn which day they're coming in, you get those ships out to sea and give them rooms to maneuver. Mm. I will look into the Halo Warfleet book because I can buy a used copy apparently for £26. Thank you, Sean. I think we're Sean who sent that frame. Thank you for that, Sean. That's it. So the British were a superpower, they would have to buy USF 14 because there's nothing else. Well, no, if they're a superpower, they probably got enough. This is the thing: if you're a superpower and you're maintaining a carrier fleet large enough to justify building your own aircraft, you'll have your own aircraft. But the problem is, for that you need roughly 6 carriers. If you have more than 6, you have 6 or more carriers, you can justify designing and building your own aircraft. Or if you're the French, you can do it for 1. But if you're anyone else, usually it's at least 6 or more. So that's the break-even point. If you have more than 6 aircraft carriers as part of your being a superpower, you build your own aircraft and probably design your own aircraft. If you have less, you probably won't. But do you think the US should build modern corvettes like Russia has? Why? That's the question I always ask people. They go, Russia has all these corvettes. They give them numerous number of ships. Why the U.S. Navy should have the same? They go, why? For them to be useful, they have to forward base them, which means they have to send them all over. They are limited in that they're only able to be used in the theatre they're in, and then they have to move them around. It's complicated and it causes issues. So you have to have a lot of them before base them all, or there's no point on. For the US, it's more sensible to have more. The problem for the US is the frigate program and the fact that the Zumwalts were stopped at 3, when really they should have gone for a less Rumsfeldian Zumwalt, and they could have kept churning them out until they worked out what to do with an Arleigh Burke successor and bought themselves a bit of time. There's a Fox. Is there a naval version of F-35 in reputation divisiveness? Oh, so many. For example, let's see. Do you go back in time and smack the guy who came up with the anti-aircraft rocket launchers on battleship turrets? Ooh, that'd be tempting. Darcy, because I like explosions, I'm merely suggesting one should gather all the data possible. Yeah, travesty, such an event to not be properly documented. Yeah. That's good. Ajax, the IFE will deafen and break bones of anyone inside. My advice is don't get in it. So, what can you do with 1 or 2 hours of warning from Pearl Harbor? Start putting steam in the ship's boilers and get everyone up and ready to go. Maybe launch a strike. And that's possibly the P139B would have been better, but it would be an issue. There had been some development done for these things. None of them, they're all on paper. They could be very good, but they have to be developed to be that good. Declan, how plausible would we use hot air balloons for surveillance in the modern age? Not very. Expect them to get shot down quickly. Are the Klingons more like the Japanese or the Russians? That's a whole different question. More interesting question is, who are the Romulans like? And once you work out who the Romulans are like, then you can start asking who the Klingons are like. Because once you know who the Romulans are, you realize that the Star Trek is the Cold War in space. For much of the Next Generation and the original. In winter, if we do get LHDs to replace our current ships, should we look at a second VSOL aircraft back of the F-35? Probably not. The F-35s could launch from them. If you design the LHDs properly, the F-35s can make use of them, so that's more sensible. It's always more sensible for a medium power to concentrate its efforts on having more of one type of aircraft or more of one type of ship than to have multiple types of specialist vessel. Because, and I've been asked about this question in the past, general purpose versus specialists. And the thing is, if you have specialists, and let's say you have a pool of 3 of them, one of them gets damaged, you're down to 2. And yes, there you're 100% solution, but you're now down to 200%. Whereas if you have 3 sets, so you have 3 sets of specialists, well, you can for anti-submarine warfare, anti-air defense, and land attack as your ships. So you have your 9 escorts. That's great, but you're snookered. But if you can design a general purpose vessel, and you can maybe afford, as you don't have separate logistics lines, separate training lines, separate production lines, etc. for free vessels, you can maybe afford for the same value 10 to 11. Well, if you can afford 11 vessels which are 70% solutions, that's going to be a 770% solution, starters. But also that's going to mean you usually have more of them available. You usually have at least 4 or 5 available for any operations. Whereas if you have 3 sets of 3, well, you're usually going to have 1 of each type available at best. And yes, they're 100% solution, but that means you have 100 versus a 350% solution for any problem. It's always better to have the backup of the multiple ships, because then if you lose one ship, You haven't lost all your capability for anti-submarine warfare. If you lose one ship, you haven't lost all your AA defense. You've still got the others. So when you're a small power, general purpose really does stack up. This I've been reading about the British Empire. It comes up repeatedly that the British stumbled their way into their owning colonies in Africa and Asia, with the British not wanting only trading cities. Thoughts? There is a good argument to be made that the British were the most disinterested empire builder known to mankind. There are certain people who really are intent on building the British Empire, but as a state, the British are quite, oh, we've got somewhere. Oh. Ah, well, better us than the French. Dan Freeman, does the Romans being China make Taiwan the Vulcans? That's an interesting one, isn't it? Frank, let's see. What did the UK do in the Second Iraq War? Sent an armoured brigade and a few other troops. And did some amphibious operations. I think there was some Royal Marines, did some landings in Althor Peninsula. Yeah. Went skimmed the cultural history of the RN online academic book. They mentioned the tribal class as a reflection of British imperial consciousness. Did you read? I'm not sure. I may have read the book, may not have read the book. If it's in my list of sources, I did. But honestly, there was part of me which was went to actually what the people wrote at the time. I'm not really going to. I went with it, and I was very careful to say this is what the people really believed at the time, what they believed they were doing, and what they were trying to do. It might not be that way. In reality, it might come off slightly differently, but this is what they were trying to do. They were trying to do something which they thought was nice. Okay, from our mindset, looking back at it, we might go, "Well, is that really? Is that really?" But they thought it was kind of like, when they had the town class cruisers, etc. They were honoring something by naming a ship after it. They felt it was an honor to have a warship in the Royal Navy named after you. And hello, Stafford. Let's see, having fun with torpedo. Always have fun with the torpedo. I'm gonna be doing some more videos using the fluffy torpedo at some point. I have some ideas for it. So expect some more 60-second videos to come out at some point. I'm probably going to be recording 60-second videos while I'm away with Justin Craig. So I'm going to have all the long patrol videos recorded for this week, next week, and the week after. Hopefully by the end of before I go away. And then while I'm with Justin Craig, I'm going to do some 60-second videos because, well, I'm going to have people who will assist me. Precisely. Endurance of P40 is about 2 to 3 hours. Time to altitude is about 6 minutes. Hence, you'd have them standing by and take off about 15-20 minutes before they have to give them time with max fuel. Pretty much. Take care, Stafford. Thank you, and say hello to your mum from me as well. Shamak, are you seeing my messages? Yes, I am. I was just waiting for them all to be fully out before I started reading, because I noticed one came in, then another one, then another one, then another one, then another one. I was sort of going. So Sean Mack has written, ideally, you design a 100% solution for one role that is like 70% in the other role, then have 100% specialists for that role as well, but that costs money. Anything which is a 100% solution in one role is never going to be a 70% solution in another role. It's never going to be more than 50, if not 40, because of the compromises you make for that 100%. So you have to accept a maximum of 90%, and probably, as I said, 70%. So what will be, if you're talking about Type 45 and you're doing it as a general purpose ship, the compromise might well be the 70% would be, well, we'll go for the Mark 41 VLS versus the Astor VLS, the silver system. And why would we go for why is the Mark 41 a compromise versus the silver? Well, you might ask. Well, the silver actually has the highest rate of launch for any VLS produced by the West. So it's able to launch far more quickly. But of course, the Mark 41 has a far larger range of weapon systems to be fitted in it. The other option would have been able to fit more of them. That's going to take up more space, and it's also going to reduce your gym space, etc. But you could have done it from the beginning, and there was actually a plan to fit in multiple VLS types, which is more expensive, but would have given them a greater general purpose. And pretty much the odds are the Type 45s, if they had been honest about how they should have built them, they should have been built with 2 48-cell silver systems for surface-to-air missiles, and a 24 Mark 41 VLS cell system probably forward, with the 48 forward and another 48 aft. And then they would have been perfectly fine. But they didn't. So life happens. Type 26 looks like sort of it's going to be around those designs. But they're going, the British have gone, we want something which is an ASW lead, so compromises, it's not going to have area air defense. And that's what's causing the problems for the Canadians and to an extent the Australians, because of the area air defense radars, etc. they want to fit on them. And I find it quite funny when people go, oh, well, the Australians should buy the Constellation class. And I go, yes, but then they have to crew the Constellation class. And they have to sustain the Constellation class. And it's a similar thing as if you buy the Virginias versus the Astutes versus an SSK. There's a step up to an Astute class versus an SSK in terms of crew numbers. There's an even bigger step up to a Virginia. And in terms of the personnel, because of the way they're structured. And that's something which you have to think about when you're a smaller power. The US Navy has a larger pool of personnel and can draw on a large. They span a freaking continent. They have a huge population. They have the budgets. They can afford the more personnel, but the smaller countries, the smaller population countries can't. And they have to think about that quite seriously, and that's a trade-off. Right. Calvin read 100% on one role. Also, once you've adapted the system for a role, that role changes due to technology and our doctrine development. Yep. And how many times do you have to justify what you say about metricity to people in our time? Oh, so much. Don't want to go into that. Take care. Oh, right. Take care, everyone. I'm going to say I'm finishing now because I'm running 10 minutes late in terms of when I promised I'd finish, and I've got a fluffy research assistant who is looking forward to a wander this evening. So, I better go. Right. We need a torpedo emoji. That will become. I need another 6 subscribers, and then I can make a torpedo emoji. So on YouTube, not 6 subscribers, 6 people to join the channel. So I think there's a subscribe button and there's a join the channel button. And basically, it's 6 short moments to have another emoji. Take care, everyone. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you, Nordic Wolf. Thank you, 96 everyone. And that's it. Could one of the early Eurofighter Typhoon designs be made into a carrier and fighter instead of Typhoon? No. From basically the beginning, they have the wrong airframe design. They would need so much rebuilding. So if I'll answer that one. That's one. I'm glad to hear that Clarke's been informed of. Well, I hope it's always been informed. Take care, Stafford. Take care, Money640. Take care, Jonathan Burrow. Do we have homework? I could set some of you wanted Jonathan Burrow. I could set a reading list. Frank Spanner, take care, Nautical Wolf. Thank you, Alvazaski. Thank you, John Shea. Thank you, DGB40. Thank you, Alman Gasberg. Thank you, Grace Husky. Thank you, Sean Mack, Stafford, and Dan for doing all the wonderful adminning you've been doing this evening. Thank you, Jack Ray. Thank you, Bijan. Thank you, Roland Cash. Thank you, Grace Sowski. Thank you, John Shea. Thank you, Tanya Fairclough. Thank you, Alfie Rowe. Thank you, Buggate829. And thank you, everyone, for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you have a fun time. Take care. Hello. Thank you, Tanya Fairclough. Thank you, George Newman. Thank you, everyone, basically. Take care, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Dan Freeman. Thanks for the fun. Have a nice day, rest day, everyone. And thank you, Team Locker, Dockland95. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Blackburn. It's coming everywhere. 9 640. Enjoy the cat.